Terrific.
3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Town of McCandless meeting of Town Council for August the 10th, 2020. We will have the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Woods because Councilmember Swagger was unable to attend this evening.
We are grateful for the ability to gather virtually during this unusual time. Please allow us to be open-minded and thoughtful as we consider the issues before us this evening. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Starting with announcements, I would like to welcome our newest council member. You know, and you told me how to pronounce this last time, but I'm going to do it wrong for a little while. I'm sorry. Michael Terrell?
Carl, the E is silent.
Oh, okay, that's right. Michael, and he is appointed, and he is our Ward 3 representative, so he has 3.5 years ahead of him. Mike, do you want to say anything?
No, just thanks to the council for selecting me. Look forward to working with all of you. I know I've reached out to most of you just to introduce myself and hopefully get in touch with you and have a short conversation with you outside of here just to get to know you a little bit better since we're going to be working together for the years to come here. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mike. Good to have you. Next under announcements is Allegheny County has announced its 2020 vacant property program, which will be accepting applications for residents to acquire vacant properties for side yards to an owner-occupied primary residence or blighted structures remediated at a reduced cost. Applications need to be postmarked by September 30th, 2020, and will be accepted electronically. Information and instructions are available online at alleghenycounty.us.eprp. I'm sure that's on our website and will be on our social media. And that is a really nice property program that Allegheny County has. If you have a piece of blighted or unmaintained property in your side yard or behind you, and it is possible that you can purchase that for a reduced rate and add it to your property. So if anyone has that, please feel free to apply for that program. Next, the town is going to be collecting homemade knitted and crocheted hats and scarves and distributing them to people in need for the local Pittsburgh community. Knit Hope will be doing that. The town is going to be providing the collection site for them. While these items provide good physical warmth for our city's winters, they also send a much needed message to those who are struggling in our community. Distribution will be in the fall to the homeless, men and women, previously homeless, women and children in recovery programs, and homebound seniors, as well as children, teens in residential programs, and struggling families. Knit Hope has partnered with North Hills Community Outreach in the past, the Northside Common Ministries, as well as Holy Family Institute. So these collections will be in the vestibule where we did our food collection, remember before, on the town front door, right inside that door. And that will start September 1st, and they'll be collected through October 1st. There'll be a donation box there, and you can donate your homemade knitted or crocheted hats and scarves. They'll even take yarn if you're not a knitter, but you would like to participate. So you can even put yarn in there because they have knitters and crocheters that will use your yarn. I'd also like to remind everyone about the raccoon baits are out. So please protect your children and your animals to not consume these because they can really make you very ill. That's the vaccination bait that has been distributed out by Allegheny County. I'm not aware of any seminars or conferences to announce at this time. So would someone like to make a motion for let's move to number 5, make a motion for number 5 for the minutes?
Madam President? Madam
Yes.
President,
Yes.
could I add an announcement, please?
Yes. Did I miss one?
I just wanted to announce and congratulate the McCandless Franklin Park Ambulance Authority for achieving EMS Gold Plus recognition from the American Heart Association Mission Lifeline. This is the highest level of recognition in cardiac care. So I thought it was worth mentioning.
Thank you.
Congratulations to to our authority.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that.
May I add an announcement as well?
Certainly.
The library is slated to open on Monday, August 17th. They were originally slated to open earlier, but pushed it off, but received an announcement today that they are planning on opening next Monday.
All right. Thank you. Is there a motion for the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of the reconvened meeting of Town Council from July 27th, 2020.
Second.
Okay. The reconvene, how about we've been doing this as one motion.
Oh, then let me amend my motion. As aforesaid, and the meeting of the Town Council minutes also from July 27th, 2020.
And I will still second it.
Okay.
I will
All right.
second the amended motion.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Are there any changes that need to be made or any corrections? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as submitted, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. This is the time when we will take public comments on agenda items as well as any general comments. Hopefully you have signed up. If you have not, please do that now, and RJ will unmute you so that you can make your comments. And each person has 5 minutes.
Currently, we've got one person signed up to speak. If anyone else in the audience has meant to sign up to speak but hasn't done so yet, just an FYI, you can type in the chat box your name, address, and subject, and I will put you in line. Right now, we just have Rich Mangieri from McCandless Families for Better Stormwater Management. So I am going to queue him up as soon as I can find him here.
Okay.
Oh, okay, let's see. It looks like he's joining with his audio. And sent him an unmute request. He might be having some computer trouble, but I know he knows how to do public comment because we've had him before.
Right.
There you are.
There you are. Hi, Rich. And there you go.
There
All
we
right.
go.
Okay, Rich.
He
Hi,
scared me
how
for
is
a
everybody?
second.
Good.
I know I kind of had to leave and come back, but glad to see everybody. Everybody looks well. Got a couple new faces. That's nice. Fresh blood. Hey, just representing McCandless Families for Better Stormwater Management. This hasn't been the ideal year since we're having a drought, obviously, and we're having very little problems. But where I live and many of my neighbors, as you well know, suffer from dangerous conditions during even an inch of rain, where pets or land or people could actually get swept away, or ambulance cannot reach us, fire trucks cannot reach us, the power and gas company cannot reach the utilities on our road. So I would like this to continue to raise awareness, push forward. As nice as everybody has been and as friendly and interested as everybody is, still absolutely not one thing has actually changed yet. So, you know, this isn't my job. This is like my life. So I have to keep pushing, making people aware. I also like to mention that I saw something on the agenda about future developments, and I don't care if they're anywhere near me or do not affect me at all. But the system that operates stormwater management is seriously broken because they start off with a fictitious number, and then it's very easy to replicate a number that never really existed. So we just need to start over. I do know that, in case you guys didn't know that, town councils are the only people that are actually able to enforce anything. The DEP, no. ACCD, no. Everybody else, no. It's only the local town councils that can do anything. And you can get caught in a game of going round and round and round, which I have been. And it's not a lot of fun. Just so you guys know, you guys have the authority to ask Pine Township. You guys have the authority to enforce Pine Township and all the other issues that we may be having in McCandless. But it's great seeing everybody. Hope everybody's well, and have a great evening, and thank you for everything you've done already.
Thank you, Rich.
Bye-bye.
RJ, are there any other public comments?
I have not had anyone else sign up.
Okay. All right. So Mike, you will be giving a report for finance and personnel.
Okay, we have two items on the agenda tonight. We're going to review check listing number 7, which takes us from July 1 through July 31, totaling just over 2.4 million. I think it was in everyone's packet. It was posted on the bulletin board and on the town website. Wanted to see if anybody had any questions, and if Trish was on the line to answer any of those.
I am available if anyone has questions.
Are there any questions from anyone in council? All right, hearing none. Number 2.
Number 2, we'd like to review the monthly financial summary and the dashboard, which was provided in your packet.
You all received this month's financial summary and dashboard. We are beginning to see collections for real estate taxes, which is why we have the uptick in revenues. They actually are coming in July a little faster than last year. And we're not sure if that's people just taking advantage of the discount that maybe didn't previously. In addition, we had the uptick we were expecting in business privilege tax because the extension expired on July 15th. And so that revenue that we normally had seen in May came in July. In addition, we're on track for expenditures. In the 7th month, we should be around 58% for expenditures. All major classifications of departments fell within that percentage. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address them at this time.
Are there any questions?
Yes, so this is Shelley Spenholz. I'm assuming this, but I just want to state it for the record that when you talk about the percentage against available budget, you are speaking about the percentage on the amended budget that reduced our budget by over $1 million due to COVID. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. And so where you're seeing the 46% of gross revenues in 2019 compared to the 43% in, I'm sorry, the 46% in 2020 compared to the 43% in 2019, that is due to the lower budget that based on the reduction for COVID. So it's we're still about $200,000 shy in total collections from last year.
Thank you, Tricia.
Are there any other questions? I'd like to thank Tricia and Bob for keeping a tight reins on our budget during this difficult time. So at the end of the year, things will be okay. So thank you both for doing that. Next would be zoning committee and zoning report. You have the that information that you received. And so we can just move to number 2, which is a presentation of the preliminary and final subdivision development application for the Fasinger Farms plan of lots submitted by Miranda Homes Inc., located at 1280 Fasinger Lane, lot and block 610A128, as per project 3852. Prepared by Schaeffler and Company Incorporated, pages 1 through 29, dated March 6, 2020, and the latest revision, which is August 3rd, 2020. Who's going to present that?
Yeah, we've got a couple of the developers' representatives on hand here. I'm going to go ahead and send them video and microphone requests. And when we wrap up this section, I have an unrelated note on just some of the ordinances that we've had moving through in the public hearing. So before I forget, I'm just going to mention that I've got Ed Moore and Graham Ferry for Miranda here, and I believe they have one other person here, Mike Seedorf, if I'm saying that correctly.
That is correct.
Okay, there's Mike. I sent Graham a microphone request as well. Ed, you're on.
Okay.
If you all have anything that you need screen shared, just the same thing as the Planning Commission, let me know.
RJ, do you have that colored site plan just to throw up real quick?
I do.
I think that's
Hang
probably the
on.
only one we'll need.
Let me pull it up here. And to council, this was in the OneDrive link, or I mean the Dropbox link that I sent out this afternoon, if any of you want to follow along on your computer instead of the screen share. And should be good.
Awesome. Ready to go?
If you are.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Moore with Schaeffler and Company, and also with me tonight is Graham Ferry with Schaeffler and Michael Seedor with Miranda Homes. So tonight we'll just give you real quick some basic information about the plan. As you can see, it's not too big, it's not too complicated, but we'll give you some quick facts and then open it up to questions if you have any. The property is located at the corner of Broad Meadow Drive and Fasinger Lane. The property is approximately 11.3 acres in size. It's zoned R2, and one family and 2 family homes are permitted. This project is all single families. There are several existing structures on the site that will be demolished and hauled off site. The proposed project consists of, as you see, a single street ending in a single cul-de-sac with 17 single-family residential lots. The minimum lot area proposed is almost 13,000. The minimum required is 12,000. All of the lots will have a minimum width of 90 feet. As mentioned, or as you can see in the plan right near the entrance, is a single above ground stormwater detention basin. That basin will be designed to completely dewater within 72 hours of a rain event completion. So there'll be no standing water that remains. There will also be sidewalks along both sides of the new road. And last week we received an approval recommendation from the Planning Commission for overall plan, as well as the 4 modifications that we're asking for at this time. So that's all I had. With that, I can open it up to any questions anyone might have.
With this plan, I'm very familiar with this area. I am not as familiar with stormwater management plans. With this plan, I know that where that basin is on, it's on a slope that keeps going down Fasinger there. Broad Meadow, as Fasinger turns, it starts going back uphill, but that whole area is downhill. Is there, we're sure there's no risk of any kind of washouts or anything like that coming from that basin over onto Passenger Lane?
We've,
No,
we've-
the basin,
okay, go ahead, Graham.
I'm sorry, Ed. Go ahead. No, the basin's designed per all the McCandless stormwater requirements. It's equipped with an additional emergency spillway. It's not an embankment spillway. So if the basin was to overtop, well, the basin wouldn't overflow in that, in the conventional way through an embankment spillway. There's a separate riser and pipe connection that if the water was to rise high enough, it would leave the basin. It's still in an underground fashion, which, it's somewhat unusual to do that, but it's a common thing that can be done. So.
And one thing I'd like to add to that point is we've done some geotechnical investigation out here from a geotechnical engineer. And the geotechnical engineer will also be on site to monitor the construction of all the grading as well. So there'll be someone watching the work.
Okay, and then same question going down the hill there to Rochester Road, because that's a portion of Rochester Road that has gotten washed out before. So there's no extra strain there or anything, correct?
Greg,
Yeah.
you want to touch on real quick about us collecting some of the water beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, as with typical, I mean, we're meeting the conditions in that, we're managing the increase between all the necessary storm events, and we're managing over, and above that as well. So, you can never be, sure that you won't get a couple catastrophic events back to back to back, but, it meets all the requirements. We should actually improve some of the situations that have been ongoing there, hopefully. So we're cutting off and intercepting a lot of the water prior to it coming down the hill and reaching Fassinger to begin with. So that should, prove to be a positive in the area.
Yeah, to touch on that point too, if you picture the site right now, all that water is just running off of onto Fassinger Lane down off the hillside. But with the road and the stormwater system within the road, we're now collecting some of that water and taking it to the basin. So we're not making the situation any worse.
RJ, have there been complaints of water running onto Fassinger from that property?
Not in the few months that I've been here. I haven't received anything.
All right. Okay.
I can tell you, this is my neighborhood, Fassinger Lane, leads up to where I live. I don't remember there ever being a major water problem on Fassinger itself. So that's part of the concern, is that I don't want that to change.
Right. Exactly. Thank you. So there's not a problem now. Okay. Go
Right. Yeah. And I've lived at my current address I moved here in 2005, I believe. So I've been here for 15 years, and I don't remember a washout event on Fassinger.
Okay.
Although it can get icy, I will say that.
To the developers, I know that you have a handful of modification requests in here for, just the good of the group. Modification requests are things that you can ask for in the design of your development. If if there is what they call a hardship, essentially, that it would be very difficult to meet the exact requirements, if you can show that your alternative plan won't have any negative impact or would be essentially equal or better to meeting the exact design requirements, you can request a modification of council. You all saw in your council packets that the Planning Commission made some recommendations based on those, but maybe for the good of the group, if you could go into what modifications you've requested and sort of, why some of the decisions you made relating to the existing tree coverage and slopes, things like that.
Sure. The first modification we're looking for is to the grading ordinance. It says the maximum slope of the cut should not exceed 2-to-1 horizontal or vertical, and the maximum fill slope should not exceed 3-to-1. All of our cut slopes are 2-to-1. The 3-to-1 slopes are in the backs of the units or the fill. All right, take that back. There's 2-to-1 fill slopes in the backs of the units as well, instead of the 3-to-1. And the reason for that is if it's 3-to-1, you push the slopes out more, there's more earth disturbance, there's more vegetation disturbance. Typically 2-to-1 slopes are very common in our area. And as I mentioned before, we'd also have a geotechnical engineer on site to monitor the earthwork as well. So that's the first one we're looking for. The second one is in the interior slopes of the detention facilities. Shall not exceed a 4-to-1 maximum. Our current basin is designed to a 3-to-1 slope in the interior, which is slightly steeper than 4-to-1. Again, if we would go 4-to-1, that makes the basin larger. In this specific area, to make the basin larger, it just wouldn't work. And also 3-to-1 interior slopes are very common in many of the municipalities that we work with. It's not something that's out of the ordinary. So again, we'd have geotechnical engineers monitoring that construction as well. So we're looking for that modification as well. The third one we're looking for is where a cut or fill exceeds 15 feet in height. The top of the cut or the toe of the fill should not be closer to any lot line than 20 feet. And I believe we have that condition at the very bottom of the stormwater basin and even close to lot 101. So that's the third modification we're looking for. And then the last one would be the requirement for sidewalks to be all along the frontage of the property. And since this property is at the corner, if you will, of Broad Meadow and Fassinger, it has a lot of frontage. But because of, if we were to install a sidewalk along Fassinger, we would be getting, because the hillside there is so steep, you can see all those contours there, we would be doing a lot of excessive grading and tree removal to install the sidewalk. So what we have proposed is the sidewalk within our development will come out along Broad Meadow Drive. It will go down the site towards Fassinger, and somewhere at that T intersection, we'll cross over with a crosswalk and get on the sidewalk on the opposite side of Fassinger. That way the connectivity between the developments and between the municipality and the township is still achieved. It's still all walkable. You can still walk down Fassinger Lane on the opposite side of our property. So instead of, in lieu of the sidewalk along Fassinger, we're looking to just make a crosswalk and cross over to the opposite side of Fassinger. So there are 4 modifications that we're looking for, and those are the 4.
And the engineers, both on the stormwater side and the general development side, made the comments that, of course, they don't recommend whether the town should or should not necessarily approve, but just from a technical standpoint, the justification from geotech and the explanation for the sidewalk was technically sound, is the phrase that they use. And again, those are in the review letters in the meeting materials.
Madam President, I'd be curious to know what the hardship is that prevents them from keeping the setback that's required for the stormwater facility. Is it that it would be a monetary hardship that they would have to give up a lot?
In that area of the basin, I guess the history of this is, RJ, can you throw that plan back up?
Oh, yeah. Give me 1 second.
And just as a side note, while RJ is working on this, I just want to point out, I watched the Planning Commission meeting for this. And as a viewer of it, it was frustrating because it appeared that the commission members didn't have the documents that they needed in front of them, and trying to see this stuff on a screen is not ideal, to say the least. Some of the things are so small, it's hard to read the elevations and really get a good idea. And I know that those gentlemen that evening were struggling with it as well.
So to answer your question, I hope, when we first looked at this project, we had a detention basin behind lots 105, 106, 107. But based on the depth of bedrock, the detention basin did not work in that area. So we had to move it to where it's currently located. And as you can see, it's a tight spot for that basin. So it actually works best there for infiltration and the detention of the stormwater. So it's a tight fit. It fits well there. It's based on the geotech. That's the best location for it. And it is a tight spot. So,
but my point is, sir, that you've made it's tight because of where you're putting the lots. It's not a hardship of the land that's somehow prohibiting you from having the setback that you need. You've created the hardship.
I agree with Councilmember Woods. I and had proposed this actually in the planning commission meeting, that there would be no request for setbacks from the sidewalk or the slope of the pond if that lot 101 was removed. And the detention pond, it would take the other request behind lot 101 for that slope too. It would take care of almost all the requests by just removing that lot 101 and giving the stormwater basin the area that it needs.
And in concession for that modification, we've also agreed to put an ornamental type fence all around the stormwater basin to help protect people from, you know, anyone getting into that basin. So that is our concession for that modification request.
I agree with my fellow council members. My questions were exactly the same. This is not a hardship. This is a case of you not wanting to lose a lot in your plan in order to not meet our ordinances related to both the distance from lot line as well as the slope. And I think a 3-to-1 slope or a 4-to-1 slope is required. The safety issues related to it are very important. And I don't think that McCandless can right now should be considering giving modifications relating to anything relating to stormwater management. We have too many problems. We don't want to add to them.
The other thing I'd like to point out too is these modifications, they don't affect how any of the functions of the stormwater management basin. It's still designed accordingly. Again, with the interior modification, it's still designed to control the required storm events. So the functionality of the basin doesn't change.
Madam President, may I just ask a few follow-ups here?
Certainly.
And also, you know, this to other members of council who may not be as familiar with this particular area, I'll try to fill in some more information too. So the first question I have is with the proposed crosswalk instead of the sidewalk going down, has anybody studied how that's going to work with the existing sight lines on that road? Because I can tell you that that is essentially a blind turn coming from uphill. Every time I drive out of my neighborhood, I go around that turn. It's very low visibility, and if there's any truck parked at the at the top part of the road there, or at the bottom part of the road in front of the houses that are existing there, there's no visibility coming around that corner. So I just don't see how a crosswalk there could be safe. So I guess that's my first question to you is, has anybody studied those sight lines? Are people who have looked at this familiar with that? And what would your response to that be?
Is that for me, RJ?
Well, just a note in general, what the condition that the Planning Commission recommended to be put onto the sidewalk approval is that we have either some sort of engineer, traffic, engineer, professional, look at where the most ideal place would be to put the crosswalk. From a general pedestrian safety standpoint, it is recommended to try to put them at intersections because that's when drivers will be looking. Potentially for someone to cross the road would be at an intersection most likely, rather than just sort of set away from an intersection. However, the unique topography of this, I think it does make the question a little more complicated. Ed, if you have anything you would like to add at this stage.
No, again, we're committed to providing that crosswalk in the ADA ramps, and we know that the exact location needs to be determined, working with your engineer or whomever from the township. So the location of it, to us, it doesn't matter where it goes. It's just, we're willing to do it, and we'll just work with your engineer in the township on its exact location.
David, do you mind if you have questions during the detention pond, we'll address those and then we'll go to the sidewalk next.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. So let me hop back to the detention pond then. Now I'm not familiar with what the reasoning for various slopes is. So I'm not sure what the difference, I mean, I know what the difference is between a 3-to-1 and 2-to-1, but what the reasons for those differences are. But I know in this area in particular, the soil is very thick. It's a clay-like soil because it was all, I think, a pig farm at one point in time. Does that impact how water will flow? And, you know, again, you know, if you're asking for a variance from what our town ordinance requires, you know, these are kind of all explanations I think need to be vetted.
The genesis for the interior slope of a basin is almost exclusively related to one of two things. It's usually an aesthetic reason or a safety reason. The safety reason being that if someone was to be in the basin when it, you know, was inundated with water, how easy it would be for them to get out. That's typically the main reason why a basin interior will have a specific slope requirement placed on it. 4 to 1 is not an unreasonable number. 3 to 1 is almost exclusively the norm. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. 3 to 1 is typically the norm pretty much in most places. I'd say 90% of municipalities. Every now and then you'll come across the 4 to 1. But it has nothing to do with the function of the basin itself or the slope or the soils or anything like that.
So it's more a safety issue than a stormwater issue.
That's correct.
Okay, and again, just for informational purposes, what you can't see on the screen right now is down to the right, below Passenger Lane, is the Brook Park Pool. So there are lots of children who walk past this area. They walk from the homes up on Broadmeadow down Passenger to go to the pool. So just something to keep in mind. The other question I also had with relocating, so you were saying that the stormwater basin was originally slated to be where behind lots, what, 104 and 105?
More towards 106, 107, more towards that area.
Okay.
It turns out that the soils in that area are, for lack of a better term, horrendous. So they're not conducive to constructing a basin there. They pose a stability issue. The geology of the property is very strange, and the location of the basin where it is now is about where it would need to go on the site to be functional. Just because of issues with exterior slopes as well as depth to rock and fractured rock and things like that.
Okay, and even though this doesn't have to do with the stormwater runoff necessarily, the aesthetics of this, so when it was planned to be behind lot 104, 105, that area, wherever it was, aesthetically, that's kind of up a slope and it's out of people's view. This is right in anybody's sight line who lives there, who's on the street, who's on Broadmeadow, who's on Passenger. And so I take it from your earlier response that that's really the reason for the privacy fencing, is that, you know, you're putting this in a very highly visible spot as opposed to before, when it was in somewhat of an obscure, you know, not very noticeable spot.
Yeah, I'd say that's relatively correct, yes.
Are you speaking about the condition that the Planning Commission suggested?
Yes, yes. So I, because I have the plan pulled up, I don't have that particular, you know, that particular suggestion pulled up, but.
Sure. Well, I can speak to, from the standpoint of the discussion at the Planning Commission meeting. I think they were thinking a little bit more of the safety aspect, sort of what you were talking about earlier, where there are kids in the area. They were concerned about them getting too close to a steeper slope. So I think that's the main reason that they were going for the safety fencing. Although its proximity to the road certainly is relevant in that too.
Yeah, in that case, then I would just like to point out that this is a major change in the aesthetic presentation.
Well, if I could interject real quickly, the top two priorities for us is functionality and safety. Thirdly would be aesthetics. Now that we found the best place for the basin, our goal now is to treat it and make it as aesthetically pleasable as possible. Just so you're aware, these are going to be starting in the low $600,000 homes and upward. These are, so people are going to want an aesthetically pleasing community, and that's what we're going to drive. Through landscaping and through fencing, we'll make this stormwater management basin functional, safe, and aesthetically pleasing.
This is Shelley Spondles. Isn't it true though, that obviously with the modifications you're requesting, the toe of slope is quite close to areas where multiple people are going to be walking in this neighborhood? As RJ pointed out, a main component of the reason for the fencing was safety. And in my mind, the same thing applies to the slope. 4-to-1 is safer than 3-to-1. And, you're turning, I'm assuming that you are creating an HOA, and an HOA is going to be asked to maintain this detention basin into the future. And it's a lot harder to maintain a higher, a 3-to-1 slope than a 4-to-1 slope. And it makes it dangerous for those that are trying to maintain it. Besides that, I don't know very many children of 10 and above that can't climb over a 4-foot decorative fence. So I would rather see this detention pond moved as far away from these lot lines as possible and the slope reduced to the 4-to-1 required by our ordinance.
Yeah, this is Kim Zachary, and it's also not just the slope that's changing, but the pond is supposed to be 20 feet from the sidewalk, and in some places it's as close as 5 feet. So I think that's kind of a double kind of whammy on that. I'd also like to remind everyone, please, before you speak, to say your name. So with the map up, it's kind of hard sometimes to tell who's speaking, so we know who's speaking.
Madam President, just a follow-up to kind of everything that was said. This is David Smith.
Thank you.
If lot 101 was not a house, would any of these variances be needed?
That would be
well, I'm sorry, this is Graham Ferry. Well, the basin works as is. If you were to eliminate lot 101, the basin would still work as is. There would be really no.
Well, I understand that it would work as is. I'm saying, would you need any of the variances if lot 101 was not a house?
Well, in regards to the basin, no, but you would still have the issue behind. I'm sorry, for some reason I can only see part of the drawing here. But behind lots, what I'm assuming would be 103, 104, that area, you would still have that slope modification requirement there.
I think they're speaking to modifications number 2 and 3, not.
Yes, the modification specific to the basin.
Well, the modification specific to the basin would be the interior slope. And
the setback.
If you were to take it if you were to take the basin to 4-to-1, I'm sorry, not 3-to-1, take it from 3-to-1 to 4-to-1, it would have to expand a little bit. And it could possibly go into lot 101.
And for the modification number 3, I believe that's the toe of a fill or the edge of a cut, whatever exact language it uses there, has to be at least 20 feet from the lot line. They're also asking about that in regards to the location of the basin.
Well, I don't know that the toe of the slope of the basin embankment would be able to meet the ordinance requirement, even if lot 101 was to be removed. The actual footprint of the basin wouldn't change substantially. It could probably pull in some, but I don't know. I can't answer off the top of my head whether or not it would then meet the requirement.
And
could you tell me why oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, RJ.
No, that's okay. Please.
Can you tell me why the basin wouldn't be able to be pulled in to where lot 101 is?
No, I didn't say, I said it could be pulled in. I don't know if that it would be able to be pulled in enough at the toe of the slope. Basically, if you were pulling the toe of the slope up away from Fassinger. If you were to make essentially what you're asking to do is to make the basin wider in one direction and narrower in the other than what it is now. I just don't know if it would meet the setback requirement from the property line at the toe of the slope.
And
It very well might.
When you refer to the toe of the slope, it's not just the edge of the basin, it's the entire length
entire
of when
embankment,
it's
right.
descending from the top of it. So it's not just that basin footprint is what they're speaking about in modification number 3. That may be where some of the confusion's coming in.
Okay, but I mean, I think it's at least reasonable to say, without lot 101, we can get much closer to meeting the current ordinances.
That's correct.
Excuse me, I think it's important to say that I understand what everyone's talking about. This is Ed with Scheffler. But the way the basin is designed, it's safe, it functions correctly. Its location is at the entrance because that's the best location for it. And,
Well, under what criteria is it the best location?
as per the geotechnical report, as I mentioned, we did a study and it was behind lots 105, 106, 107, and it didn't work in that area. So we had to find a different area on the property. So
Right, but what I guess what my more pointed question is why is the current location as shown on this drawing the best location as opposed to shifting it over towards lot 101 a little bit more?
Well, it's still in the same location. It just gets bigger in that area. That's the best location for the basin, at the corner of the entrance. That's my point.
So the best location is, so what you're saying is the best location is in violation of our ordinances and there's not anything that's equal to that could come closer to meeting our ordinances?
No, I didn't say that.
Kind of sounds like you did. So let me just ask you the very, very pointed question, yes or no. If lot 101 was not a house, could the footprint of the basin change to meet or at least get closer to meeting Town of McCandless ordinances?
Yes.
It's a simple yes or no. Yes.
And I answered you yes, sir.
Thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions related to these first 2 or 3 variance requests?
Madam President, I just wanted to point out that in these modification requests, they're talking about a decorative fence. And I think that what was discussed in the Planning Commission meeting was a aluminum ornamental fence. And it's a important distinction because a decorative fence doesn't really do much structurally. It's for aesthetics only. But we were talking about, or rather the Planning Commission was talking about the safety aspect, which would require something a little more substantial.
Thank you. That is correct. That is correct. RJ, a procedural question.
Yes.
Should we address each one of these individually or just at the end, or what's the best way to do these?
Well, so I would say for now, the developer is here to just answer questions sort of in the manner we've been doing and discuss the presentation in the modification requests. You can go one by one if you want. When it would come to the vote, whether that's at the next meeting or one in the future, I would go one by one on the modification requests and the plan approval.
Okay. All right. Perfect. All right. I don't.
Madam President?
Yes.
This is Shelley Swanholz. I think that I'm assuming we might be moving on from the detention basin, but
Right.
I would like to make a formal request to the developer to go back to the drawing board and to look at creating a plan that eliminates lot 101 and creating a plan that meets our ordinances. I believe that they will have no problem meeting the 4-to-1 slope requirement, and I believe that they will meet most, if not all, of the toe of slope to lot line modification issues.
I would support that. All right. So we can, there was also about the detention pond, there was also a suggestion to do infiltration testing. Yes, to infiltration testing.
Yeah,
And-
that was something that our stormwater engineer PD suggested there be certain benchmarks that I believe it's over the next 2 years that they have to test a couple times a year just to make sure that, you know, the developer has done some infiltration testing and proposed a rate based on that. They have to verify that over the next couple of years before they fully turn it over to the HOA. And if there are any inconsistencies with that they would need to remediate them before, you know, considering the pond to be functioning correctly. That is the condition that PVE suggested for this basin, as designed here shown.
I would like to have that. I think that's an important thing to have added. I also think we were going to have a traffic study to see if some of the buildup on the basin, because the land wouldn't be at, we already know that there's some site issues there, but once the basin was built up, if it stays in the same place, a traffic study to make sure it wouldn't make the line of sight worse.
Right, yeah. And that would be like a general site triangle study that could be just performed pretty straightforwardly by an engineer.
I think that would also be something important to add. Is there anything else about the detention pond? I think the next thing, what's the next thing on there? The slope?
The sidewalk waiver for
Sidewalk.
the north side of Fassinger Lane was the final modification they asked for.
All right, all right. Are there any comments on the sidewalk?
Madam President, I'm not opposed to this modification if we can get a traffic study done to determine where their sidewalk should end for people to safely cross. As Councilman Smith pointed out, there is a community pool at the bottom of this hill. This is somewhere we can expect children to cross and walk to swim practice and walk there to swim during the summer. So I would want to make sure that that ends in a suitable place for them to safely get across Fassinger Lane. Additionally, when they talked about taking this out of the plan, I want to be clear what the trade-off is for that. Presumably, this would be an expensive piece of this that they're no longer having to do. And I know that in previous projects, the McKnight Elementary School project comes to mind, when the school district didn't put in the sidewalk on Cumberland Road, but made a concession and put in it, was waiting for it, but put in the nice crosswalk across Cumberland Road. So I'd be interested to see what sort of concession the developer would be willing to make when they no longer have to foot the bill for this sidewalk.
I know also in the past, we have done payment in lieu also for areas that were not really just cost prohibitive for a sidewalk, and that there was payment in lieu for building sidewalks in other areas. I know we have done that in the past also. Are there any comments about the sidewalks? Any more comments? Excuse me.
This is Shelley Spanholz. I agree with Councilman Woods that I have no objection. I think this is a practical solution to a very difficult and very lengthy strip of passenger lane that the developer would otherwise be required to build a sidewalk. And I'm also cognizant that in order to do so, they would also be disturbing hillside vegetation and quite a few trees on some of that area. However, I also have the same question about, it seems to me, that sidewalk based on site work and length and earthwork is an extraordinarily expensive component. And I think that my question is there, this might be an RJ question, is there a vehicle by which we have a formal process for saying what the Councilwoman Woods alluded to, and Council President Zachary talked about, of saying, fine, we will forego this again, this ordinance requirement for this development, but like the green space that I believe this developer already took advantage of. They chose not to develop a green space within their development, and they paid some amount of money to do that. Is there something formal, RJ?
So,
is appropriate?
if our town attorney or the town manager want to jump in, just because they've been working with these ordinances a little longer than I have, I don't believe I'm aware of any formal mechanism for a fee in lieu for sidewalks specifically. Like you referred to, we do have a fee in lieu mechanism for a dedicated recreation area that's done per housing unit in a development. If there isn't a formal mechanism, which I suspect there's not right now for the sidewalk fee in lieu, just as a general note, I would strongly recommend that we take a look at that, because this certainly won't be the only time this question comes up. But Mr. Rob or Mr. Grimm, are you aware of anything that I'm not right now with that?
I could just add, RJ, that the way that this has been handled historically is, first of all, you're right that there is nothing in the code that I can recall that specifically speaks to a payment in lieu for sidewalks. But I will say that historically what's been done is the developer has essentially voluntarily agreed sort of in return for the modification to make that payment in lieu. So, it's a condition that once agreed upon by the developer essentially becomes binding upon the approval. So we've sort of informally done this on multiple occasions historically.
And just wanted to also note that per Gateway Engineers or development engineer, they did recommend if we were to permit a modification to waive the sidewalk on that north side, that we do require an easement for future development of the sidewalk. If it makes sense down the road, that we would be entitled to, pursue that later on.
This is David Smith. Just whoever takes a look at that, there's also the possibility of just a partial sidewalk that gets around, around the bend there past the biggest blind spot area. So just whenever somebody goes out to take a look at that, if that's something we could bear in mind, where doesn't necessarily have to go all the way down, but if it can get around that bend to where kids are crossing in clear sight lines. My biggest concern with the crosswalk is the safety of children.
And that was what the Planning Commission recommended. And you can see the crosswalk wouldn't be good at that big fat Y right there. So what they had thought is kind of come around that bend a little bit where it's narrower, but still staying close to the intersection, because that's where people are expecting to stop. Mid-block, people aren't expecting a crosswalk. But maybe not where the first house is, but like where the second house is from coming up Passenger, like right around in there. So that's kind of what they were thinking of too, David, just exactly what you're saying. So It's not in the middle of an intersection, right?
And the only thing I would point out with that is because there's houses there, you will occasionally get, lawn service trucks or just regular vehicles. And when they park there, there's no visibility at all. And so when somebody goes to go around those trucks, they're going to be, if there's a crosswalk anywhere near where those houses are, they're going to be right on top of the crosswalk without any warning.
So we would have to put some no parking signs up there then, you're thinking?
I don't know, because I'm not sure I'm not sure how much in practice they would be followed, not by residents, but by service companies that come out. I mean, so for example, I've seen lawn service companies, utility companies, if they're doing work there, a lot of times they're parked somewhere right there. And I don't know if a no parking sign would dissuade them or not.
So one piece of this is, I think because of the way that that bend is and sort of the overall topography of this area. Coming from both directions, it might be difficult to find a spot that's completely ideal. Maybe this is something that would be helped by, you know, some pedestrian crossing signs, or, you know, some of those things that kind of make people think to pay attention as they're coming up. And those are pretty low cost fixes. Of course, you know, based on the recommendation from the Planning Commission, if this modification were to be granted, to pursue some sort of traffic engineering to figure out the best spot.
Right.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's kind of hard to sort of just eyeball it from this standpoint without the engineering, but the other alternative is you want to be careful about where a sidewalk might end. It might be more amenable to a crosswalk, but what's the grade like going across the road? Is it going to be ADA compliant or safe? You know, there's just a lot of things that go into when you're trying to make accessible crossings, when there's any sort of grade in the road that are also worth considering. I think it's a tricky intersection, you know, but the engineering might enlighten us a little more.
I mean, the solution might even be to put the sidewalk on the other side of Broadmeadow instead of on the new development side of Broadmeadow.
Yeah,
and have the crosswalk on that side, because that offers the most visibility in that area. But like I said, my only concern is that somebody actually goes out and does the sight line.
Right. There's another plan of lots on the other side called Greystone that are in progress right now. I believe the existing condition is that there's essentially a driveway right on the corner of the other side. There's no sidewalk on the other side of Broadmeadow, but the conditions there may change based on what goes on with the Greystone plan.
Oh, RJ, I'll interject. I'm familiar with the Greystone plan. There's a sidewalk all the way on the opposite side of Broadmeadow.
Okay, so that might solve our issue.
Yeah.
So that sidewalk is going to go all the way around that bend and connect up around that, totally around that bend to Passenger, because there is no sidewalk from that end, from that corner property. Is that corner property staying?
No, the corner property is being demolished, I believe, in the next week or two.
Okay. All right.
There we
And
go.
as well as that driveway, but I do not know with certainty if it truly connects. I think there may be a property line, some property issue between where the Greystone plan of lots is and where that house past those trees. If you're looking at,
Right.
I'm not sure if it truly connects. I do not know that.
It does not.
Okay.
I looked at it. It does not. But perhaps with the development and the demolishing of that house, it will. We'll hope for that. Are there any other questions about for the developers or the engineers?
Madam President, I have a question. I apologize, I'm not able to pull it up right now. RJ, maybe you can. The landscape plan.
Oh, okay. If you give me 1 second, that's a pretty large file size, but I might be able to pull it off on a screen share. Let's see. Landscape plan. All right. Let me give it a shot.
Can you tell us what your question was, Angela?
Yeah, sure.
about it?
So it appears on this that there's no landscaping whatsoever around the stormwater detention facility as it is right here. And I know that mention was made that PVE had requested that they remove the landscaping from that. But when I read what PVE had to say, it said that they removed a particular tree, and that the landscaping be removed from the berm of the pond there, not all of the landscaping. And so again, I know that we were asking them to look at this, taking lot 101 out, and that would hopefully change the slope of this. But I would, if and when we see that plan, I would like to see what sort of landscaping you have planned for that area.
And I would refer, whatever the next iteration may be, I would refer that as well to our development engineers, because they're typically the ones that review the overall landscaping of the site and what those buffer yard requirements might be. So, you know, just depending on some of the solutions that they could use to meet those requirements, we can have them take a look at that again.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, I think we have discussed this. Do we need to make any official recommendations about this? I know Shelley had made a request. I didn't hear any response to any of that. I haven't heard response to any of these requests that we've made. Ashley, should we wait till a later time to vote on this, or what should we do with this?
Good, RJ.
Oh, well, so what we had scheduled was the presentation sort of to get this feedback overall and have this discussion at the meeting with the intention of at the earliest voting at the next council meeting. Of course, if there are any changes that come from this discussion, that may change the scheduling of that a little bit. Certainly up to council, you know, however you all want to handle this, unless Mr. Rob has any additional feedback, but that was sort of the original plan.
Yeah, I think that plan makes sense. I was just going to suggest the council doesn't need to take, as long as we're not on a deadline, right, RJ, as far as a deemed approval.
We officially accepted the application at the July Planning Commission meeting as administratively complete.
Okay, so we'll have 60 days from that date to take action, so that, you know, you do have time. You don't have to take action tonight, I guess, is the bottom line. So if the developer wants to go back, take another look, and possibly make some tweaks, that's certainly an option here.
Madam President, may I ask that we get the final plans, if there's some revisions, a little earlier than the day of our meeting, so we have time to review them?
Yes, I think that we won't have to worry about that anymore. I think we will get all of the plans when we get our packet. In fact, even getting them, once they're through, I'd be fine, RJ, because this is a big deal. It takes time to look at these things. I would be fine as soon as we know it's coming to council, just send them on to council to go ahead and let them start looking at them.
Yeah, I think our subdivision and land development ordinance has it that when the initial applications come in, we forward, you know, a couple copies to council. I'm not so sure, you know, how useful a couple copies are while we're in sort of this electronic world, but, you know, in general, I would say forwarding the plan, or if there are any revisions that come along now that we've got the Dropbox and SharePoint set up, that's definitely something we could do in the future. This particular development came in right before COVID got paused by some of the state legislation, and now it's sort of just coming back around. So I apologize for any confusion that occurred in the transition there.
Any other comments or questions to council about this Basinger Farm Plan?
I do want to clarify, Madam President. I think I said 60 days, but it'd be 90 days from the date of the acceptance for the application. So, right. Okay. So we have some time there.
Okay. Okay. All right. Are we ready to move on?
I just wanted to make a note. I don't know. Mr. Grimm, would you like us to do the zoning ordinance stuff before or after the bond reduction vote?
Let's do it after the bond reduction.
All right.
You know what else too? Would council give the nod to having RJ, I don't know if RJ, you would look at this, or if our solicitor would look at this, but look at and maybe prepare something for us to review about payment in lieu for future developments?
Sure. Yeah, that's something that we could do in tandem.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we're ready to move on now. Yes. Okay. All right. Number 3 is move to approve the bond reduction for the Walnut Court plan of lots from $323,937.74 to $177,275.75 as recommended by the town engineer.
So moved.
Okay. All right. That's Angela.
Trish, second.
Okay, Trish. And basically what this is that once a developer has certain parts of the plan that have been inspected and reviewed, that they can get a certain amount of their bond back, right? So, and it has been determined by our town engineer, this is enough to get back to them now. Any questions about this or comments?
I would just point out that this has historically been done informally in McCandless, and I think that Mr. Grimm and Ms. Susko's idea to have this formalized by council vote is consistent with municipalities planning code. So I think it's a good idea to be doing this moving forward.
Agreed. All right, thank you. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Poor Trish, she's a little delayed there. Okay, the Public Safety Committee, Angela is going to take.
Madam President, if just one other quick thing under the zoning committee, if we can just have one other quick discussion prior to moving to public safety.
Okay.
We have been talking internally amongst staff and with some of the council people in regard to the upcoming review hearings on the proposed ordinance on the household pets and chicken regulations that have been discussed and reviewed in the Planning Commission and our steering committee or subcommittee there. And staff feels that it might be beneficial to split the ordinance, which currently is in a state of being both items in one ordinance, splitting that into two separate ordinances for consideration, so that if we find that chicken regulations would be slowing the review process down and the debate process down, then we may be able to move forward with the household pets portion of the ordinance and get those regulations in place to help those situations that we've been hearing about over time. If council has no objections to that, my suggestion would be that we split that up, delay the public hearing for the household pets until, RJ, you may need to help me on the dates, the 14th of September.
Yes, I believe that we should be able to get the ad in time for that. At worst,
Yes.
It might be the second meeting in September.
Yeah, I mean, my goal would be we would get the ad in for the household pets to hold the hearing on the 14th of September, followed by the chickens on the 28th.
And it was confirmed by the county that we do not need to go through a re-review period on their end if we are not substantially changing or really changing at all any of the language that they reviewed in the original submission, which is the case here.
I think that's a good idea. I think having them separate is a good idea. Is everyone all right with that? Is there anyone against that?
No, I just have a question about, is there a reason we can't do both public hearings in August? We've already advertised for the entire ordinance.
We're have the other public hearing that we're also have is on our small cell towers. That may be, I don't know that we've ever done more than 2 public hearings in one night. I guess we could. Chickens might be a big public hearing.
Gavin, I have a question, a procedural question. If we were to split those into 2 separate ordinances, is that a substantial enough change to warrant a re-advertisement?
I guess I'm trying to think. So we have right now everything set up and has been advertised for the 24th. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
You know, I mean, I think you could follow the same logic, I guess, as the county, applied to say, look, you've essentially advertised these exact ordinances. I mean, I think I'm not sure it's material to split them up if you're just essentially hearing public comment and, and having a hearing on the exact same provisions. But that said, to your point, Mr. Grimm, that, it may be more efficient to split these only because I think from what I understood, there was going to be maybe some more digging on the current version of the chickens ordinance. And maybe I misunderstood that based on, and I can't recall if that was a conversation with RJ or someone else. But again, it just may make sense to have the DAS on the 24th, the household pets on the 24th, if that's been advertised. And then, I think we can probably split off the chickens if we wanted to and push that back into September without having to re-advertise.
I'd be fine with that. I just want to make sure that procedurally we do what we need to do so that we don't have any issues with enforcement down the road.
Right. I mean, obviously the safest play, because zoning is so technical in nature when you're adopting a zoning ordinance, the safest play is to, separately advertise and split them off, as you said. But I really think it would be defensible if council really wants to push this forward for the August hearing, that we could still have, the one household pets. Again, it's not ironclad, but I think it's defensible.
I'm fine either way. It makes no difference to me.
I feel the same.
Well, if all things being equal, if there's no immediate rush, why don't we do them all sort of separately, just to have all our I's dotted and T's crossed, unless, again, someone really wants to try to push this through quicker.
Any objections to council?
Well, I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?
I was just going to say, so we leave the DAS hearing for August 24th. We re-advertise a separate standalone ordinance for household pets for hopefully that early September meeting, if we can meet that timing, and then see where we are with the chickens. But if we're in position to advertise the chickens hearing at the second meeting in September, then you have them all sort of done a little bit more cleanly.
I'd prefer to do household pets on the 24th of this month. Get that one done, as long as we've advertised well enough to do that.
We've advertised for all of them though, haven't we?
Yes.
I think one of the main questions here is whether the public will understand or be aware of the change that we're thinking of splitting the consideration of the household pets and kennel regulations and the chicken regulations, and making sure they know what is the appropriate meeting to comment for adoption.
I mean, we could certainly publicize the fact that we will only be taking action or consideration of the household pets portion of the ordinance at the meeting on the 24th. My purpose in bringing this up was to ensure that if we are splitting this up, that we are doing things properly with our advertising and our hearings, so that we do not have a problem later.
Gavin, a question for you on the procedure for that then.
Sure.
I mean, does it make a difference if, the household pets goes forward and we don't do the chickens, but then that is an amendment to whatever happens with the household pets rather than a separate ordinance? And the reason why I say that is because the notice has already gone out. I can't imagine there would be a problem addressing less than what the notice says. So if the notice says household pets and chickens, but then we only end up addressing household pets, basically reserving the sections that apply to chickens. I don't think there'd be a notice issue with that, right?
Well, and I think that's what I mean about it being defensible. I mean, these zoning, when you're adopting an amendment to your zoning ordinance, you really have to make sure that you know, you're very particular about the technical aspects of it, notice and
Right.
everything. Your point, you're right. You've advertised the entire ordinance that's under consideration, plus really a separate section. Council would be taking action only on the portion of the ordinance that's, you know, again, it's been circulated, it'll be on the website, it's been provided to the newspaper, the law library, the county, the planning commission. So we've sort of met all of those technical aspects, and the way it would be handled, I guess, would be that the actual vote, you know, I would envision separate votes on separate ordinances, you know, where we'd actually split these two apart, not just for hearing purposes, but for the actual piece of legislation, so that
Okay.
we essentially, you know, sort of cut that off, you know, in the middle, sort of, and add the signature lines and then create a new ordinance solely for the chickens.
Okay. And
I
so, I mean,
believe-
so the worst that would happen if we split off the chickens is we'd get some people on for public comment who thought they were going to be commenting on the chickens, but they'll have the opportunity to do that further down the road. It'll be a wasted call for anybody who doesn't know about it beforehand, basically.
I think that was RJ's point, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, but I mean, you can still take a public comment on what the advertised version is. I mean, we can still definitely compile those. And if there's any sort of revision that comes from the feedback, you know, on any zoning ordinance public hearing, you have to, you know, basically make those revisions and then re-advertise for an additional public hearing if there's substantial, you know, revisions or changes, which splitting wouldn't necessarily be, but, you know, anything that would come out of feedback might be.
I would say too, we're not going to really say, I mean, there might be some limited savings on time. It might be a couple weeks earlier, but you're still going to have to advertise sort of that standalone newly created standalone ordinance prior to council actually voting to adopt it. So, you know, again, I mean, obviously it's up to council. I do, like I said, I don't want to repeat myself. I think it's defensible to move in that fashion, but it'd be a little bit cleaner, I think, to push it back.
Any more comments?
Is there a consensus on council so we know whether to move forward with a hearing on the household pets on the 24th?
I like to have things as clean as possible. I don't like problems. I don't like problems in the future. Whatever that takes, that's what I support.
I prefer cleaner if
This
it's
is
only going to be
Trish.
a couple weeks.
Go ahead, Trish, I'm sorry.
And I support splitting it, but I want to, in case anyone shows to talk about chickens on the 24th, that their viewpoints be recorded as usual in the hearing.
And that would be the case because all the comments are general now, so we would take all of those, absolutely.
I think that's part of Bob's point, though, that, you know, it would be, you know, the entire ordinance could end up getting sidetracked by people who really want to debate the chickens issue, because that's the public hearing was advertised for both, when, you know, it might be, again, I keep using this term clean, but you know, more efficient, more easy to understand, more for the public, if, you know, they know that this is the ordinance that's in front of them, it's limited to this, and there'll be a separate time for, you know, to talk about people's viewpoints on the chickens.
Yeah, so Rob, you're saying, or Gavin, you're saying that it's cleaner to push them both off right now rather than move forward with part of it on the 24th. The cleaner thing to do is to push them both off.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Bob had originally proposed, again, I think it's easier for the public to understand, and unless there's a reason that we really, you know, kind of need to get one public hearing done, you know, rather than kind of stagger them out. The way it's set up now, you sort of have the DAS public hearing on the 24th. You could have the household pets on the 14th. I may have the September dates wrong, so I apologize. And then you'd have the, you know, the second meeting would then be the chickens. Hopefully, if all those ducks are in a row. Sorry, I had to throw that one out there. Just the thought there. Bob and I talked about that briefly, and I thought that made a lot of sense. But I'll leave it to council.
I favor that, as long as we're going to get it done in September and not let it drag on beyond
A year? It's been a year?
2020,
We've been,
September.
yeah,
I
2020.
think you're
yeah.
approaching the anniversary in December, right?
No, no, it's been way longer than that. It's been way longer than that.
Sadly, yes.
Yes, yes, okay. All right, is that all right? Answer, are you okay with that?
I'll go with the group, whatever you all want to do.
All right. Then if it's okay with everybody, we'll take Bob and our solicitor's recommendation and go with that.
Okay, and I'll work with Bob and RJ to split those up, and so we have two different pieces of legislation for advertising and public hearing purposes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Send those around so we like them and we can keep this moving, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Are we ready for public safety?
All right, I'm out of your hair. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, RJ.
Thank you, RJ.
Angela, I think that's you. You're helping out, aren't you helping out Carolyn?
Yes, I am. So the chief's report has been included in your packets, and it looks like Lieutenant Basil is available if anyone has any questions. We're both substituting today, Lieutenant Basil.
We are.
Are there any questions?
No?
Okay.
Okay, I think those are ours.
Okay, Public Works, Angela, again.
That activity report is also included in your packets. Mark is here if there are any questions about that. No? All right, and then the next issue is the discussion of the installation for lines for pickleball at Wall Park. So this came up recently. A resident sent an email. She was wondering if it would be possible to put pickleball lines on the existing tennis courts in Wall Park. This has already been done at Town Hall. So I forwarded that information to Public Works and to the town manager. It sounds as if this has been budgeted for this year already. It's just a matter of double checking the quote, which was, I think, very nearly a year old now, making sure it was still in line and then deciding whether or not to proceed with it at this time. I will say the quote for this, and Mark, please correct me if I'm wrong, from September 2019 was approximately $15,000 to do this work. So interested to hear everybody's thoughts on this.
That sounds really expensive. To put line, I mean, I have no idea what it entails, but that sounds crazy high.
That's what I thought too. Mark, perhaps you can speak to that some, because it was news to me that this would cost that much money, but Mark had a good explanation for me today. Are you available, Mark?
I will send him an unmute request. Give me 1 second.
There he is.
Good evening. You all hear me now?
Yes.
All right. The request that came in, how about that? The request that came in through Angela was, and it had been presented to us before, was for use of the tennis courts down at Wall Park, similar to what we had done out in Devlin Park. At that time, after receiving that request, Bob and I talked, and I threw an idea out there. We have a very large paved area down at Wall Park that was done as a kind of a deck hockey venue, let's call it, many years ago, and it is very poorly used, if used at all now. I don't know for sure that anybody still uses it. I had the gentleman that does most of our color coding on our tennis courts take a look at it, and you are right. It is the $15,900 bid is expensive for one pickleball court. That bid is to create 5 pickleball courts in the area down at Wall Park. There would be an 8-foot spacing in between the pickleball courts, which would allow the folks that brought this to our attention. Currently, they're using courts out in Cranberry Township for a league that they run. By creating 5 courts down there, it would give them a location here in McCandless that they could move their league down to this area and maybe increase the size of their league. So the 15,000 quote it's not a great deal of money in thinking about creating 5 courts. If we were only creating 1 court, yes, indeed, it is a very large amount of money.
Is this in this year's budget?
It can be included with work that we had planned for Wall Park.
It just seems to me that we're trying very hard to save money right now, and that maybe this is something that should be considered for next year.
I agree. I support the idea of doing this in a better economic situation. It's, you know, when we're having to make tough decisions about our budget and getting, you know, making difficult decisions, spending $15,000, well, nearly $16,000 on this right now doesn't sit well with me. But I do think it's worth doing
Great.
at another time.
And Bob, you could put that in maybe the recreation budget. Yeah, I know you're making the budget for this next year. That's a possibility. We have to see how all this is going to shake out yet. We don't even know how it's going to shake out.
True.
Yeah, this is David Smith, and that was a comment from Kathy Geigel. Hopefully, I'm getting her name right. Yeah, I agree with what you all have kind of said. I think, Mark, the price tag makes a little bit more sense now that you've explained it. And I do think it's a great idea, but I think right now is just not the time for it. But I would love to kind of put a pin in it for next year's recreation budget, because I have only recently come to know that pickleball is apparently a huge thing. You know, it's completely foreign to me, but I have heard a number of people talk about pickleball. So
Trish,
I think it will be great.
Trish, I think you were trying to speak.
Thank you. I spoke about this. Our Activities Advisory Committee also brought this topic up last week. It was brought to our attention that it's not a good idea to have these lines painted in the tennis court. So I'm very happy to hear it was going to be planned for a different space. Another caution that I heard was from some other communities that the noise level and these games can go on well into the night, that part of this project, but maybe to include signage, that games must be finished by 9 o'clock or something like that as well, would be a recommendation coming from the Activities Committee. In terms of the cost, I'm a little sticker shocked as well, and I would like to see this happen soon, but maybe not this year.
Okay.
One comment about the Wall Park site, there are no lights down there. There was never any intentions of putting lights at Wall Park because of the residential properties directly across the street from the park. So with the exception of the dead of the summer, when there would be some daylight down there a little bit later in the evening, they would have to stop play fairly early anyway throughout the year.
Thank you.
So we're agreeing that we think this is a great idea, just maybe in next year's budget. Is that pretty much, I got nods for that?
I believe so.
All right.
I believe so too, yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyone disagree with that? Okay.
No. Thank you for your help, Mark. That concludes my report.
And I would also like to thank Angela, because she handled, even though it was a citizen in my ward, she got the original request and kind of coordinated everything. So thank you, Angela, and thank you, Mark. And thank you, Kathy Geigel.
So the council's been working very hard for almost 3 hours. Anyone interested in a 5-minute recess? Sure. Okay. 5 minutes. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
All
Do we
right,
just
I'm
stay
gonna
on?
pause the recording.
Ah, there we
Here.
go. Okay.
I got it. And we're good.
All right. Thank you for that short recess. Shelley, Services Committee.
Thank you. The Fire Marshal's report for the month of June 2020 and permit report for July 2020 is in your packets. And Fire Marshal Stack, I think is, yes, he's still here if anyone has any questions or comments. Okay, hearing none. Also in your packet was the Code Enforcement's Violation Complaint Statistics Report for the month of July 2020. Are there any questions or comments? Thank you. That concludes my report.
Trish, Recreation Committee.
Thank you. We did not have a meeting of the Recreation Board, so I will leave it to Mr. Grimm to give us a fitness court update, please.
Thank you, Ms. Clonan. The fitness court is just about ready. We're only waiting for the decals to go on the, I guess it's the back side of the structure. And we are working with UPMC on dates for a soft opening, and right now it is looking like possibly September 12th would be that date. I'll let you know for sure before the end of the week as we're trying to finalize that. But, it's looking good. The front side is decaled, so if you wanted to stop by, you kind of get a sense of what it's all about. So things are definitely moving forward with that.
Very good. Thank you. Any comments or questions about that? Okay, moving on to old business. We need to have some further discussion on amending and restating of the ordinance number 1486, Part 9, Title 1, Article 907 of the town's codified ordinances regarding objects in the right-of-way, signs in the right-of-way, and to establish an enforcement procedure and penalties for violation. So to update everyone, we were working on a sign ordinance for a couple of years. We adopted something last year, I think it was, but it didn't seem to quite get accomplished what we had hoped it would accomplish. What we were trying to accomplish with this was we wanted to decrease roadside litter. These are for temporary signs that are posted around around on the roads, whether it's Sally's Ballet or Boat for whoever. So these are temporary signs that we're talking about. So we were having a lot of trouble with roadside litter. We found some the plastic signs over stormwater drains, so they're interfering with our stormwater drains. And we were, and some of these signs are put in places that I can't imagine how someone took their own safety in their own hands to put these signs in some of these places. So public safety was an issue. Also, we had some blocking the vision triangle at some right-of-ways. And also with the wire that's kind of left, can damage the mowing equipment for some of these sites. So we were looking at all these things, trying to prevent some of these things that were happening, but we wanted to preserve or keep balance. There's people's freedom to determine how they use their own property. So balance, of course, is the key word here. So that to update new council members. So that's kind of what we were going for with this sign ordinance. So here it is back again. Excuse me. And so we're ready to take comments on it and see what everyone thinks about it and if this is kind of accomplishing some of those goals. Any comments? Does someone like to start us off?
Madam President, this is David Smith. I have a couple questions, I guess comments and questions half directed to Mr. Robb. So for under 907.03A, I agree with the sentiment of that, but I worry that we're placing the burden on the property owner to figure out where the right-of-way ends. Because I know in the last discussion of this, one of the concerns in the enforcement was we weren't really sure, you know, where all of the rights of way may extend to. So I only worry that we're placing the burden on the property holder here to figure out where that right of way is. Is there a rule of thumb distance that we can come up with that we know is within the right of way so that we're not impeding anybody's private property, but that still gives, you know, whatever it might be, 3 feet, 5 feet? I just don't know what that safe distance would be, quote unquote.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and that's what we've really been wrestling with here. You saw, you know, because you have a red line version in your packets, and you saw we tried to use sort of a 10 feet from the cartway as a, you know what, eyeball it. That's you're almost certainly that far from the cartway. You can pretty much assume you're on private property.
Right.
That's why we had that in there. But you know, council did not seem to like that approach, and it's not, you know, one size fits all. There might be, you know, I don't know if RJ or Bob know what the town standard is. I don't know if it's a 50-foot right of way or, you know, from the set measure from the center line, 25 feet.
It is indeed a 50-foot right of way.
Okay, so, you know, so then you have 25 feet from the center line, and then you figure out where's the cartway end, and then you measure out the rest. It is, there's no sort of, you know, perfect black and white answer, but again, if you're 10 feet from the cartway, that's sort of what, at least in my mind, says, all right, look, you're definitely on private property here. Nothing to worry about. And to be clear, when we talk about private property, you know, your yard, the right of way generally overlaps into your property, right? So it's right. Private property. However, you know, it is within the right of way, and the town does have control to an extent over what goes in that right of way. And the idea here is to ensure, primarily, in addition to the litter and the aesthetics, that we're not interfering with any kind of sight triangles when people are coming up on intersections, because these things are too close to the road. So that our goal was to really, number one, simplify the ordinance as much as possible. And we recognize by doing so that there is sort of this, you know, grayish area where, all right, does the right of way end, you know, here, or is it a foot back? We're trying to use sort of, from an enforcement standpoint, really a common sense, you know, enforcement. I mean, you know, Jeff Shaneman, the code enforcement officer, who's probably going to be responsible for responding to complaints, is hopefully not going to be out there with a measuring stick saying, well, that's, you know, 6 feet or 8 feet or whatever. This is, I think, primarily targeted to some of the, you know, sort of triangles that are public property where these things are accumulating, or places, you know, places that are more obvious. This is not an attempt to go neighborhood to neighborhood and get out the yardstick and make sure these things are not too close to the road.
Right. No, I totally get that. The follow-up I had to that was, you know, if we have this language, can we put almost a safe harbor provision in, you know, that says, you know, if you're on your own private property and the sign is more than 5 feet from the edge of the cartway, you know, you're in the safe harbor zone. You don't have to worry about it. Because, I mean, that could help both landowners and enforcement officers, you know, giving kind of, yeah, it's not going to answer the question in every situation, but, you know, if there's that rule of thumb where the ordinance is private property, and to give the landowners a little bit of guidance, if you're more than X feet, you're safe, you know, whether or not that might be within the right of way.
I think that's a reasonable suggestion. I mean, I think we could probably make that work. And that was sort of the intent with the last version, but I think if we kind of keep what we have here, because I guess to sort of take a step back, I mean, I think it somewhat goes without saying that you can only put signs on private property, right? If you don't have, you can't put on other people's property without their permission. Can't put signs on public property without the permission of the property owner. So we're just sort of stating, I guess, the obvious to an extent, but we want to keep it as simple as possible. But yeah, maybe to your point, we could say something like, signs that are located at least 5 feet from the cartway are presumed to be on private property and are permitted. Something as simple as that.
Sounds reasonable to me. Are there any other comments or changes or anything that any discussion we want to have on this?
Yes, Madam President, I was wondering in that same section, it says, and may not be placed within the public right of way or on public property. Gavin, I wonder, is it appropriate to say nor on public property?
Either or, neither nor. That's what I learned.
I don't know. I guess I have to think about that. Or sounds righter to me, but I can't now that you say that. Now I'm reading it the other way. I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's the right way to do it. Can I get back to you on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all you got, Angela?
Well, hey, I'll take one letter. That's if that's what it takes to get this thing passed after this many versions. Yeah. It'll be Nord by the end of this meeting.
Trish?
I have a question. I think in a previous version, it exempted temporary real estate signs for open houses, etc. I'm not sure if I'm seeing that in this version. Was that omitted?
That was omitted. This would apply to all signs because, again, the theory is one of the primary reasons is traffic safety. So, even a temporary sign like that goes within this area, just because it says, open house rather than vote for, whoever doesn't, I think it creates the same issue. We don't want to have different rules for different signs based on, what is the text that's on them.
Any other comments?
I do have a couple more. I have one question for Gavin and then a couple other just comments for discussion. Gavin, the question I have for you is a long time ago in my previous life as an attorney, I did work on utility easements. And I know that at least in certain circumstances with utility easements, basically you can't remove something on the right of way unless it actually interferes with the use of the right of way or with the easement. Is the same true with public rights of way like this? Or, this was so long ago that the law on the easements may have even changed. I just want to make sure we're not risking anything there.
I would say we have to meet a rational basis standard, Mr. Smith, and that is why we, in the recitals, we will specifically cite to the traffic safety, the aesthetics, to allow us the authority to do that. So, you're right. We can't just randomly just pick and choose rules. We need to have, which is the minimum level, but it's a rational basis. What is this regulation rationally attempting to do? To achieve. What is the government attempting to achieve? And then we'll lay that out in the recitals of this. I feel comfortable with the traffic safety and aesthetics would allow us to implement these regulations in that right away.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because that popped into my head. And then the only other comment I would have would just be, I guess it's twofold. In 90703D, and this is directed more to council for discussion. I think I'd like to see some kind of attempt at notice in person, like if it's a sign that's clearly in front of somebody's property, but it's not where it's supposed to be. An in-person attempt to return the sign, with no penalty before it kicks into everything else. And then the only other comment I have is that the penalty does seem a little harsh to me. But so those were the only two other things that I wanted to throw out for discussion.
What penalty would you propose?
I mean, I think I'd probably go, I think I'd say some kind of graduated penalty. You know, first offense, nothing but a written warning. Second offense, you know, 150, and then third offense and thereafter 300 maybe. Something, not that I'm tied to those numbers. I'm just, I'm always leery of anything that could be read as restricting speech, and I know why we're doing this and everything like that. I don't want to freeze speech out. And, you know, a $300 penalty right off the bat, especially when the removal provision as it stands is just a, you know, it's a removal and then we'll call you from somewhere else. I think if it was an in-person at the time attempt and then, you know, first violation, no penalty, and then a graduated penalty to the 300. I don't mind the 300 for repeat offenders.
I can tell you from a departmental standpoint, it's not our will or goal to every sign that we see that might be a little bit out of the spot. You know, we're not sending you a $300 citation on your first. You know, and
I understand that.
Right.
To
It's
me,
more
though, it's
intended
more
for the repeat offenders.
Yeah, no, and I get that. To me, though, when you're talking about anything limiting speech in any way, it's to me, it just has to be very kind of even-handed. Look, this is what the ordinance is. This is what we're enforcing. Because once you get into a gray area where somebody can say, well, you did this here and you didn't do it here, and it's because of the message that was on the sign, not because of anything else. To me, that's a worry because that's a potential legal liability. And Gavin, you can jump in if you disagree with you know, the sentiment of that, not necessarily the proposal of the language or anything, but just the sentiment of the worry.
I 100% agree with that sentiment, and we certainly have to be cognizant of being, you know, in a situation where it ever looks like someone's grabbing a sign because of what's on that sign, because it's, you know, someone who might not be, you know, because of that political candidate, because of that message, whatever it is. You're absolutely right. We don't want to be policing speech in any way, shape, or form. You know, providing a warning for practical purposes, as RJ said, is going to happen, you know, 10 times out of 10, for sure. This is really, you know, hey, we found 50 vote for Sam signs clustered on the, you know, triangle in the middle of McKnight Road or something like that. I mean, that would be the only time. And even then, you know, I really think it would be probably a stern warning, a letter to say, look, this is really problematic. This is really sort of a last gasp, like, hey, if you're really just going to kind of thumb your nose at all of our regulations, we have a fine that's up to $300. Now, keep in mind, that's a magistrate's discretion, right? So we're setting the high end of that. It doesn't mean it's not like a parking ticket, right? Where you get a citation and boom, you owe $300. It's, you know, we have to file a citation with the, you know, we issue a citation, we have a hearing at the magistrate, and then the magistrate has the authority to grant up to $300. And Judge Wagner certainly is a reasonable guy, and he's not going to, you know, he's not going to slam, you know, someone who has their sign 4 feet from the cartway after we issue them a citation. So certainly understand, you know, understand your concern there, and we would have to be cognizant as to how we enforce this. And again, for practical purposes, it's you know, it's going to be, you know, please work with us, a phone call, a letter, whatever it is that we can try to do. And this is just sort of the worst case scenario. So we don't usually build those sort of kind of staggered penalties into the ordinance itself. We sort of rely on sort of reasonableness and common sense from our enforcement officers and the town staff. But that's not to say that, you know, we couldn't. I mean, it's certainly permissible to say, you know, the first violation upon conviction. Now, keep in mind, again, you got to go through that process to get a conviction. You know, if you're forced to go to that point, you've expended a significant amount of town resources whether it's legal, whether it's town staff time. If you end up with, say $100 on the first attempt, well, you probably put, many times that into trying to get this person to comply in the first place. So we can step it up if that's council's desire, but that's sort of why it's set up the way it's set up.
Other people's opinions on this?
It seems to me that the change to add so what we're saying now is they shall be permitted on private property, but not placed within the public right of way. So we've sort of eliminated a piece of private property, which then becomes enforceable. I guess I hadn't, until Councilman Smith pointed that out, I hadn't envisioned our code enforcement officers picking these up off of private property. It sort of envisioned this being picked up off of signs being taken down from public property along roadways. So I agree that if there's a situation where the sign is within the right of way, I think a first attempt should, rather than take the sign to town hall, we should make an attempt to talk to, I'm thinking if it's in my yard and it's too close, my expectation would be that someone would just say, hey, it's too close to the road. Can you move it back a few feet? And then, that could be settled pretty easily rather than go through this process. And then potentially, I don't think that would be reasonable to go right to the penalty phase, but, it could potentially get there. I like to keep this as simple as possible so it's easy to understand. But that seems to be a little bit of a loophole that needs to be closed up, I think.
Well, I think that's part of the problem that we have now is that we are, we're trying, because of the fact that this is vague, and there were requirements to try to contact the person, either the sign owner or property owner. We weren't moving a sign until we had tried to make that contact. Meanwhile, the sign stayed out there. The intent of this was to clean up the right-of-ways and then get the signs back to the owner as soon as we could, make them aware that we had them. So, I think we fall into the possibility of going right back to where we already are. That if we try to place too many, I'll call them restrictions on our code officer for the enforcement, we haven't accomplished what I think we were trying to accomplish.
Right. So this came up last time we were talking about the properties that back up to McKnight Road, the steep slopes, and those sometimes have signs, and those are privately owned pieces of property. So when you refer in section D, a reasonable attempt shall be made to contact the owner by telephone. I had read that as the owner of the sign, as in like it's a dance school sign and you call the number on the dance school sign. Are we referring, or is it both, maybe that or the owner of the property?
We're trying to, and Jeff has had success in contacting the owners of the signs as opposed to the property owner. Like in the case of along McKnight Road, those property owners are maybe on Saratoga and not on McKnight, and it's trying to sort out where on McKnight that relates to Saratoga. It's often easier to just reach the dance studio and say, hey, get your sign down, or we're going to take your sign down and it will be available at town hall. And that's certainly what the intent, I think, would be, that we would assume that unless it's way back, you're going to assume that it's on the right of way, take it, and then call them and say that they can pick it up. But part of what I'd like to be able to do with this is provide guidelines to those people that are putting signs up that give them that rule of thumb of where they could put them and where they couldn't put them. Have the what you should be doing. Contact the property owner for permission. Give them a sense of how far back off of the cartway the sign should be in order to be on private property. And then let them know what the process will be in terms of being contacted if they're not placed properly.
Is 10 feet enough to get us out of the traffic square or the triangles? Not the big one, I guess, at the clover leaf.
I think by and large, the average triangle, it will encompass that the right of way will encompass that whole area. The interchange, my opinion is that interchange is all right of way, and that we will address it accordingly.
Yeah, so if my understanding is correct, from remembering from the last discussion, the clover leaf is all within the right of way. And so setbacks wouldn't even matter because the town hasn't given anybody permission to put signs there.
Correct. Correct.
And, I mean, so that's good because that addresses that one. And the notice, I understand, it is hard to, some of these situations are going to be hard to determine who is the property owner sometimes. But I think if we do put maybe a safe harbor in there of, if you're on private property and you're X amount of feet from the cartway, you're safe. There's, to me, that would solve a lot of my concerns, I think, both from the landowner and the enforcement side.
I thought that's what it said.
There's no safe harbor right now.
I mean, not those words, but Gavin, don't we have that this is where you can put the signs?
Well, we took out the 10 feet, or all that language is gone now because we simplified that. It just said, again, no right of way, no public property, only private property. So we talked about adding back in, based on Mr. Smith's comments tonight, a 5 foot, 10 foot, whatever we think is appropriate. Now, I'm just thinking practically for 5 feet, and this might be an RJ question or a Bob question too, but by the time you get from the cartway and you sort of get to the sidewalk and you get to the other side of the sidewalk, you're probably at about 5 feet, putting it right on the edge of the sidewalk, possibly from a cartway. I don't know if you want them along the edge of sidewalks in those situations, or if you want to push it back maybe 10 feet.
Yeah, I mean, 5 feet is usually going to get you past any sort of standard tree line and sidewalk. Maybe some of the more recent ones are built to be a little wider, so they're, for accessibility purposes. I would say that at least 5, it's generally safe that you would be past that. Now, depending on when the road was built, the exact right of way might vary. The current design standard is 50 foot. So, that's at least the most restrictive that it's safe to assume you would have enough space with 5, for sure with 10, but definitely at least 5.
And I would lean more toward that, using David's terminology, that safe harbor being 10 feet back, only because you have a variety over time of right-of-way widths. The old days, there may have been a 33-foot right-of-way. Sometimes they expanded that to 40. Now the current standard is 50. But if you go out onto McKnight Road, those are much wider right-of-ways. So
and there are also cul-de-sacs to think about.
Well, exactly. And I'm thinking to myself, if we, based on the definition that we put in of cartway, if we set that safe harbor at 10 feet, then I personally would feel comfortable that if we had to measure anything, that 95% of the time we're going to be on private property if we're back 10 feet.
Bob, I have the opposite concern as you.
Okay.
My concern is that I want to guarantee that that safe harbor is still within the right of way. Because I
Okay.
don't want to deprive people of putting signs on their private property that is past where that right of way goes to. That's my concern. So if you're saying 10 foot definitely puts them on private property,
Right.
then that's where my concern actually comes in, because that means that we're preventing them from using some of their private property to put signs on.
But I guess short of doing a survey, we don't know where that.
Well, and that's why I'm trying to leave the distance as small as possible to still hit our goals. You know, and you know, maybe it's 5 feet from the cartway or 2 feet from the sidewalk, whatever's greater, or something like that. Although the cartway defined as including the.
To the curb, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, the cartway is to the curb. And I think if I remember from my easement days right, a normal road is like 33 feet wide. Is that right?
It depends.
Thereabouts. Yeah, it's a pretty good.
Yeah,
ball.
it can fluctuate.
That's a tricky part. I mean, keep in mind, if anyone knows where their right of way is, you know, that's the only limitation we would be trying to put on them. So we're just really trying to create some sort of kind of broad, as you said, again, it's a great term, safe harbor, to say, look, if these people, if they don't know where if they know where their right of way is, they can put this thing right up to their right of way, and that's fine. If they don't know, which is going to be the case in most instances, unless you've had a recent survey, I think the ballpark of, you know, again, whatever that number is, 10 feet, 5 feet. But to Bob's point, I think a lot of these situations that we're dealing with practically are along these highways or these major roads where some of these signs are, you know, 5, 6, 7 feet right off the highway. And then all of a sudden we have to say, well, they got that safe harbor, so they get an extra 3 feet. So I think what you're envisioning, and I think what the actual enforcement is going to be, I think maybe are two different things. And I'm not saying that you're wrong not to be concerned about, or to be concerned about that, because obviously, you know, you're right. We want to be very sensitive to private property rights. And this very clearly states that if it's on private property and outside the right of way, you can put it there. That we want to be real clear on that. But when it comes to sort of a safe harbor, or just sort of a standard to try to apply so that Jeff Shaneman is not out there, you know, just trying to figure all these things out on the fly. And again, primarily what we're seeing is problems on these heavily trafficked roads, not cul-de-sac type communities. You know, that's what we're trying to figure out, something that's workable.
Yeah.
We need to make a designation more for residential properties and commercial. So like if you're on a residential property, do we really even need a 10-foot setback? Like, is someone going to really make that big of a difference if it's 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet? And is there really a safety issue there?
For practical purposes, Mike, you're right. I don't think that that sort of enforcement will go on in these residential neighborhoods. With that said, I think we have to be careful about, you know, how we're regulating signs on private versus, you know, on residential versus commercial property. The idea, what we're trying to do here really is just to have something that's applicable sort of across the board. We want to make this as sort of neutral. Like, you don't have to, you know, make a determination as, is this a residential property? Is this a multifamily apartment? Is this a, you know, a shopping mall? This is just, look, we want these things off the road and on private property to protect the traveling public, and so that there's not this litter just does not accumulate, primarily again within these large public right-of-ways. So I mean, rights of way, I should say. So I mean, it's a good point. I just think that we're just gonna, it's gonna be tough to write that. And as Bob and I and RJ and Jeff have had a couple several, let's say, phone calls trying to figure out how we're gonna how we're going to dice this up. We really think that this is, and this actually, Ms. Woods had a really good suggestion that helped us get to this point to sort of simplify things. But we think that this is, enforceable from a constitutional aspect. It works for Mr. Shaneman from a enforcement, like the guy who's out there in the truck looking at these things and seeing what the problems are. And we think it'll accomplish the council's goal. And I think, knowing the staff there, they are going to take a reasonable approach. If it is a situation on a residential property, knowing Mr. Shaneman is probably going to be, either it's going to be, probably looked past, because unless it's causing a traffic potential hazard, or it might be a knock on a door. Hey, this is right up against the carway. Could you just push this back a little bit further? We have this regulation in place. And to Bob's point, a lot of it is sort of preventative. We want people to know this regulation's out there, so we stop people before they do this. And then the folks who are going to be running for office or, wanting to put these signs up, we want to get this out to the public to say, look, these are the rules of McCandless. We want to try to, rather than trying to yank these out from where they're not supposed to be going forward, we want everyone to know, all right, hey, in McCandless, you cannot just stick these things along the sides of roads. That's the rule out there.
That was very clear, Gavin. Thank you. I think that articulates what I think we're trying to accomplish. So,
So
just a comment?
This is Dave. So yeah, for me with that discussion, I mean, that makes sense. And that I still would like a safe harbor provision, whether it's 7 feet, 7 feet preferable, but if it needs to be 10, I understand that. And then I guess I would still like to see the penalties, at least maybe first offense results in a written warning, and starting with the second offense, it's up to 300. So even if we don't have a graded penalty, at least basically giving the first one for free. Those would be my 2 suggestions.
We could go with 6 feet and say your sign has to social distance from the road. Everyone's very familiar with how far that is these days.
How wide is the mower blade, Bob? Do you know that?
I think it's a 5 foot. No, I think it's a 5 foot deck. So that would, if we socially distance the signs from the cartway, we'd be safe.
Because we don't want that wire all up in the mower.
True.
This is Shelley. After doing cleanup days repeatedly, while I appreciate what Mr. Smith is saying, that I think that, and I don't mind a safe harbor, by the way, at all, but that for the very reasons that this was discussed in the first place, which was to keep McCandless a beautiful, litter-free place to live, which frankly, I don't believe that our enforcement officer will be out there for a single second in the residential neighborhoods looking to identify signs that he's going to want to pull out or move. And I would, knowing what it does to our equipment, knowing what it's like to have to clean it up, knowing that the lawnmowers chop it up so that cleaning it up is even harder, and knowing what our intent is, I, again, not averse to a safe harbor, but I think it has to be at least more like 8-10 feet to solve for the problem we were trying to solve for, one of them in the first place. And as I think I mentioned last time, I also think the amount of the penalty just is excessive. I get the practical component of it, which is that there's a lot of stuff that our staff is going to go through before they get to that point. I just think it sounds, especially talking about for each sign and each day. So I don't really have a great solution for that, except I think it's too excessive, and I'd feel more comfortable if it were knowing they're going to do all those things, that it was, if it's for multiple signs and each one, I'd feel more comfortable it's something less than 300, maybe 100 or 150. That's what my comments are.
Councilman Smith, would you be, for section 907.03A, if it read instead, signs shall be permitted only on private property, comma, but not within, and I'm just going to put a number, and here's a placeholder, not within 10 feet of the cartway, nor on public property. Is that sufficient to allow people to use their yard the way you would expect?
Well, I think the way Gavin explained it, or at least the way I understood him explain it, is if a sign is on private property, they're good. The safe harbor is only for it's only to prevent us putting the burden on the landowner to figure out where the right of way ends. I mean, because if we do that, we're basically saying, we as a town don't want to do the job of figuring out where the right of way ends, so we're going to make you, the landowner, do it. And I just don't think that's right. I don't think that's right to do to a private landowner doing something on their own private land. So the way that Gavin explained it was, if a landowner knows where the right of way is, they can put their sign right up against it because that's their private property. If they don't know where it is, the landowner can put their sign within, 7 feet, 10 feet, whatever, of the cartway and know that they're safe, so that there's not guesswork going on by the landowner. So to me, if we make the modification that you suggested, what it would do is it would say, in those situations where the private property comes closer than 10 feet to the cartway, then we're taking their private land. To me, I know it's not in the legal sense of taking. I'm just using that term. No, I'm not using the term in a legal sense.
Do not say taking of land, please, please.
No, and I don't mean that in a legal sense. We're restricting their use of.
Don't say it.
We're restricting their use of their private land, and that to me, I is concerning.
So I just want to you're okay with it as it's written?
As it's written, with a clarification that basically says as a second sentence, in any case, signs placed on public property more than X, say 10 feet, 7 feet from the cartway will be presumed to meet all requirements of this ordinance. I mean, I'll leave it up to Mr. Rob to come up with.
Not on public property, not on public
property, no, specifically on private property.
Okay, you said public, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, so in any case, signs placed on private property more than 7 feet from the cartway will be presumed to not be in violation of this section.
Gavin, what do you think about that?
I can live with that for sure.
I can live with that.
We just need to know what that magic number is.
If the mower is 5, let's give them, is 7 just odd?
7 is good with me. Sorry.
What do we think? 7? Is 7 odd? I mean, it's an odd number, I know, but is 7 okay?
I said 7's lucky.
It splits the 5 and the 10, kind of close.
I'm good with 7.
Hello, friends?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's it. Were you at it, Gavin?
And then to the notice and penalty part. So if you only get to the penalty, right, Gavin, after we've removed the sign taken it back to town hall, tried to contact the owner, right? So that would serve sort of as like a first warning.
Technically, any violation of any of the provisions of the ordinance constitutes a violation that could be subject to the penalty. So for practical purposes, you're right. But the way that these penalty provisions are written is essentially, look, if you violate, any of the above provisions, you're potentially subject to the penalty provisions. So we could, again, I know that the town will not want to prosecute violators for all the penalties under here. I mean, I think it's much more, the intent is primarily the removal of the nuisance signs. The penalty provision is to give it teeth in the event that we have essentially a repeat offender who's we take the signs down, they put them back up, and we finally get to a point where we say, look, pal, like this is you could be subject to a fine of up to $300 if we have to cite you and go through that process. So that's what this is meant to do. So if you want to build in a written warning, or Mr. Grimm had mentioned to me when we were discussing this that one of the models we could look at would be the false alarm ordinance. Where you have you have your first false alarm is sort of on the house, and then it's increasing fines going forward, and that's, you could have nothing, $100 for the second offense, $200, $300, etc. Still maxing out to $300 if you wanted, whatever you think.
So Pennsylvania law is $300 for littering. That's the price. You throw your trash out, you get caught, it's $300. What if we had a phasing in? Because what's going to happen is people aren't going to know this. Okay, I think maybe that's what we're afraid of, is people aren't going to know this. So what if we did a phasing in period where nobody got penalized while we because we have an election even coming up, where we said, okay, for the first 3 months, no penalties. But after that, everyone should know. And I'm making up 3 months, just a figure. After 3 months, people should know that signs are considered litter and in a public area, and they'll be treated as such. But we give people phasing in time to learn about it, time to know that, oh, I didn't know we couldn't do that. We did that last time and it was okay. What about something like that?
I think you're going to hit different people, different election cycles, and it's not the same people running every year. So this is somebody could potentially go through.
But they would know, since this is new. I mean, they would learn that since this is new, because they would learn that. The people who support this candidate or that candidate would know, oh, these aren't where the signs go. And that would be their job to find that out, where signs can go. I've had people call me who say, where can signs go? And that would be their job to know that once it's known that we have this ordinance. Just an idea, a way to gradually ease this in, to not just give people sticker shock. But if anybody knows Jeff Shaneman, he is a very reasonable, level-headed kind of guy, and he's not a tyrant. He's not going out there to let's see how much money I can raise today. That's not his goal, or that's my impression. So yeah. I don't expect him to be heavy-handed with this. I think what Gavin said is the truth. It's going to be people. I know what he's done with people who violate with their yards. He goes and he talks to them a couple of times, before he's like, listen, we're going to have to fine you if you keep doing this. I think he's going to handle this the same way. Now, according to that, those people can be fined right away too. But that's not our practice here.
Well, I would just point out that we can't always count on Jeff being in that role, and we can't always count on Judge Wagner being the magistrate. So I think we need to have a rule that stands the test of time. I'd sooner make it a stepped up process than like on a time period. I like the idea that Gavin put out about the first one's on the house. And then after that, if you continue to just put them out and put them out and put them out. And I would expect that we are always going to have someone reasonable in that role. We don't know who it's going to be next.
We get to hire them though.
True.
Yeah, and say, these are our expectations of you.
But I'd prefer to see it stepped up.
In the original I did propose a warning, but I think after a warning, I don't think it needs to be 100, 150, 300. I think you get a warning, you know you're not supposed to do it, and then you're fined.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, so if you want to add a warning, first warning, and then after that, a 300 can be, doesn't say has to be, can be issued. I think I'm fine with that. Other thoughts?
I'm good with that. I would like to circle back to what Councilmember Sponholz brought up with the last sentence of the penalty, with each sign each day is a separate offense. That does seem a bit draconian to me. I don't know what the solution to that is, because I know the problem that we're trying to get at. And ultimately that gives it enough teeth to solve the problem. I'm just not comfortable with each sign each day, especially when it doesn't have to be removed. It can just be a sign that's sitting out there. There's no notice, no anything. The way the statute reads, if the sign is up in violation of the ordinance, it's a it can be up to a $300 per day per sign fine, whether or not an enforcement official has come by and removed the sign. So I have concerns with that last sentence.
How did you say to change it?
We can delete that last sentence if that's council's prerogative.
All right, delete it.
Oh, sorry.
Delete it. I'm fine with deleting it. What else needs changed?
I think from my perspective, I think that that addresses my concerns.
So we have a safe harbor, we have a written warning before a fine, and we eliminate the every sign every day as a separate violation.
Nods?
Yes, I think that's correct. Yep.
Okay. Can you bring this back to us and maybe we can vote on this next meeting?
We'll have to advertise it, but we can draft it and get it out to you to review as soon as possible.
Okay.
Then we'll advertise it for action.
Okay.
This wasn't, oh, I'm sorry.
This doesn't have to be a public hearing.
No.
Okay. Yeah, because it's not zoning, so this shouldn't have to be a public hearing. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. What did you want to say, David?
Oh, I was just gonna ask if it was advertised for today.
It was not.
Oh, okay. So it has to get advertised in any case.
Yeah. Yep. This is just a discussion item.
Okay.
Are we ready to move on? Okay. All right. New business. We are discussing our code of ethics policy to establish a set of principles and practices of those associated individuals serving the town of McCandless. Many towns are adopting a code of ethics. There's, of course, a code of ethics for serving council members. I know most workplaces have one. My workplace has a code of ethics. And what we're trying to accomplish here is a clear and concise communication to everyone associated with the town of what the expectations of the town is for those individuals. It's just kind of a way of putting everyone on the same page. So we read that. What are any thoughts on the ethics policy?
I liked it.
Okay.
I
All
think
right.
something consistent. It's not too long. It says all the things that I think that we already would expect of ourselves and the staff and employees, committee
thought it was-
members.
I thought it was pretty comprehensive too. Is there any additions that anyone thinks needs to be made, or things they don't like, they want to have taken out? Awesome. Okay. Okay. All right. That was easy.
Can I, not to throw a wrench in things, because I know that was easy.
What?
I think nine might have been added after I had taken a look at it. So I was just reading over 9A. So when you say engage directly or indirectly in any business transaction or private arrangement for profit, which accrues from or is based upon his or her township, I guess that should be town, or I guess we'll change township to town, obviously. But when you say accrues from or is based upon the the position or authority, I guess I just want to make sure I don't know if we need to tweak that language, or if that's all right, if everyone else understands that, maybe I just am being sort of obtuse.
But what does it say to attorneys, Rob? Attorney Rob. Well, tell me, what do you hear?
I hear engage. So if you're engaging in a business transaction or a private arrangement for profit, pretty clear,
Okay.
which accrues from or is based upon the town position or authority. So I guess I don't know what, like the business transaction accruing from, like what, maybe I'd need an example. I mean, so just, I guess what I'm used to, right, is the State Ethics Act, right? And there's a conflict of interest definition that most of council, hopefully all of council is familiar with. You can't use
Right.
your position. It's a conflict of interest to use your position of authority or any confidential information you gain for your private pecuniary benefit for you or your family or your business. So that's the state law. And I just am trying to figure out how these sort of play off of each other.
And you're looking at, and what are you looking at again? Which number?
Not
9A.
9A.
This is Dave. So as an attorney reading it, and Rob, Gavin, thanks for pointing it out. Yeah, the accrues from or based upon is kind of loose, because it's, you could say, well, I got to be known from people in the town because I sat on council, but it had nothing to do with my actual duties. I think if we could maybe have it mirror language more from either, the attorney's ethics rules, or Gavin, I don't know if there's kind of something somewhere in the municipal code. Or
Yeah, that was what I was referencing, actually. The PA State Ethics Act is what applies to all public officials.
But this isn't just for public officials.
Right. No, I agree.
Right.
Understand. But I mean, I wonder, do you want to go beyond? Right now, there are individuals who are not covered by the Ethics Act necessarily, who are going to be required to comply with this code.
Right.
This seems to go beyond even what the Ethics Act would require of public officials, but maybe it doesn't. I guess, again, I'm just not sure. I have the concern that Mr. Smith raises, accrues from or based upon can be read very broadly. And, I just wanted, if we're going to put the code into place, I want to make sure that we have it in such a way that we know what we're prohibiting, and so we can enforce it.
So so here, this might be an example of that. So if you had an individual who was on a committee and was very good friends with everyone on that committee. And so when they came before council in their professional position, they were already had favored standing among other people who were coming. Let's say a developer. Okay, say we have a developer that's on a committee right? And let's say town council, and everyone loves this guy, right? He's a great guy. So when this guy comes before council or comes before another committee, he already has the edge, because even though he may just work for this other committee, because he is on this committee already. Do you see what I'm saying? That he's
So-
using his relationships of being on that committee to further, and this actually, and the example I'm giving you, whether it applies to this or not, has actually happened here since I've been here. Someone's on a committee, they're best friends. When they come in before council to present something, hi Joe, hi, you know, names everybody in the room because they're all good friends because they've done so many things together. And then it's like, oh yeah, we're friends with Joe, so we're going to go with what Joe wants to do. So
I think that would be covered under the regular conflict of interest language from that Gavin was referencing. Where my concern comes from is something like, you know, you have somebody who sits on town council, and just because, you know, they're doing certain work, or they're, you know, however it comes to be, you know, a company says, hey, look, we've seen what you've done on town council. We want to hire you to be on our board of directors because we think you're a good leader. You know, now if there's any conflict of interest, they would obviously have to resign from town council. But the way it reads now is that that person wouldn't be able to take that board of directors position, because it arguably accrued from or was based upon their service on town council. And so, you know, as long as it doesn't create a conflict of interest, I think it's okay. Now, if they took the job and they kept their town council position and it created, you know, obligations that were at heads with each other, you know, then that's a conflict of interest that would be covered under the under just the language that Gavin was referring to. But that would be where my concern would come from. And maybe that's not the best example to use, but it's that type of thing where it's a, you know, it's not that they're using their position to further their own personal interests, but, you know, they did come across some benefit, you know, just because of, you know, their increase in notoriety from serving on town council or whatever the case might be.
Gavin, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the Code of Ethics already address that situation that, well, for council members anyway?
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're using your office essentially to gain some sort of private, you know, to make money for yourself, a family member, or a business, then that's exactly what's covered.
Well, even with employment following your service on as an elected official.
Right. Right. I mean, I think there's a time period within which you have to wait before you can go back before the town, before the entity at which you served. I think it's a year.
Might be 2. I can't remember exactly, but but that does exist. So I guess I would just ask if the point of this is to expand who the already existing Code of Ethics applies to, then we don't need to rewrite the Code of Ethics. We just need to say these additional people, you know, we expect them to abide by the PA Code of Ethics. Trisha's dogs.
Yep.
Because that already applies to council members.
And that may be cleaner is if we parroted that language, but I just want to make sure it covers everything that council wants to cover here on this in this code.
I think we go beyond it some, which is fine, but I think we could eliminate something like 9A and B and probably C pretty easily if we made like number 1 or 2, wherever we feel like it fits, that all these people who we name in the introduction we expect them to adhere to the Pennsylvania Code of Ethics.
Which it actually already says in number 1.
And there we are.
The first thing that everyone's agreeing to do is faithfully abide by the PA Public Official and Employee Ethics Act.
So are we saying then that we wouldn't need number 9?
If the goal is to just apply the conflict of interest provisions of the Ethics Act to everyone who's going to be bound by this code of conduct, I think you're covered by number 1. If we felt like we needed to spell out number 1 or to add a second, another provision in there somewhere, just sort of parroting the conflict of interest language from the state act, we could certainly do that, just so that it's front and center, rather than asking all these members and officials and employees to go digging through the state statutes to find out what exactly that means.
Unless I'm missing something, go ahead, Shelley. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that I think that while we want this to be sure, I think one of the things we want to be able to do is share this with each and every employee, and that we're trying to get on one sheet of paper something in your orientation that represents what the town, not send them on a, to go Google what the state ethics rules are. And having said that, I do actually have to agree that at least 9A, 9A is, in my opinion, not well scribed. It's overly broad, and I'm not sure what it means either, because I've been trying to noodle around what could it mean, what could somebody do, and I would rather either someone rescribe it to what they think it was supposed to do or delete it. That's all I have to say.
And I was even thinking in number 7, where it refers to, the obligation to disclose at the earliest opportunity information that may result in a perceived or actual conflict of interest. We could then go on to say conflict of interest as defined by the State Ethics Act is, X. And then that would be basically what I sort of started off the discussion with when I described that to Mr. Smith. Just a thought.
Gavin, is items 2 through 8, do they add any value to this, or should we keep it simple and just refer to the PA Public Official and Employees Ethics Act? Is it adding anything?
I think maybe just to help people understand, it's more, some of those things are more sort of good governance thing. I think technically you'd probably be covered by the Ethics Act, but I think to Ms. Bonhold's point, having folks it sort of reinforces these good practices of being on a board or being an employee or being, a part of a committee. So I think a lot of it is just sort of, a lot of it's common sense stuff, but I think it does send a good message to the employees and the appointees. I think where we want to just be extra careful, I think, is this conflict of interest, because that really does have legal teeth to it. And I think we do want to be very precise when we're talking about what's prohibited and what's not.
Is this a one-size-fits-all policy? Is it? I don't know all the law stuff, but is an employee held to a different standard than an appointed position? I would imagine the appointed positions, elected positions, are held to a higher standard.
That's correct. Yeah, your employees are generally not subject to that State Ethics Act. You're correct.
But we are doing that here, right?
That's I guess the intent of this code of conduct. One of the intentions of this code of conduct.
Oh, to take it up a step for our employees.
Right. And then any appointees who might not technically be subject, who might not be public officials who would otherwise be subject to the Ethics Act, to make sure that, look, if you fall into any of these categories, we're expecting you, right off the bat, number 1, you must meet the requirements of the Ethics Act. And then in addition to, things like maintain a professional level of courtesy, respect, and objectivity. That's not coming from the Ethics Act, but I think that's just more of a, this is how the town expects its appointees and employees to behave.
We didn't have one for McCandless, for our employees or for our police, or we didn't have a code of ethics at all. So I've never worked at a place that didn't have a code of ethics. So it was Bob's idea. That was a great idea about putting this together. So I definitely think we need something. No one ever, I can speak for myself, I never, if something says, oh, you're supposed to do this, now go look 20 places to see what that thing is. People don't do that.
Yeah.
So if we can certainly put references for more detail somewhere else, but I think putting just references for other places to go. Have you ever tried to find anything on the county website or the state website? It's like awful. So I'd like to make it simpler than that. So, you know, if we could do something on our own like this and could reference that, and we could put references at the bottom, I'm all about that. But I definitely think we need something like this. And we have to sign ours at where I work. We have to sign our code of ethics saying, I saw this, I read this, I understand this, and I'm abiding by this. So
I agree. I love it. It's just the language of 9A is the only thing that threw me. But other than that, I think it's a great idea. I like both the content of it and just the optics of, you know, if you're going to serve the town, this is what we expect. You know, so I like it from every angle, just other than that little bit of language in the middle of 9A. That's the only part that's a tripping point for me.
Gavin, do any of our union agreements allow us to do this, or do they have any say in any of these?
they're allowed to be unethical. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, I'm just, do we have to pass the language through anybody?
I would defer to the town's labor council on that, but I would think that if, at a minimum, once this is in sort of final form, we would want to run this past the union representation in sort of a meet and discuss type format, just so that they know that this is.
Yeah, I'm sure they're for it, but they might want, some input.
Yeah, anytime you're sort of springing, anything like that, even if it's a managerial prerogative that doesn't necessarily have to be bargained, it's a good idea to just to avoid those kind of surprises.
Anything that doesn't say anything, let's take out. If it doesn't say anything, take it out. I'm fine with that.
Let me ask this: if anyone serves in any of these capacities, is there any instance where their business would be able to do business with the town? So, for instance, any employees, any members of commissions, any committees, is it the intent of council to prohibit that, or just limit that to, in the sense that they can't use their influence in their respective position to gain essentially a pecuniary benefit?
I think you eliminate far too many people if you do it if there's no business transactions at all. I think that they just need to not use their influence for their benefit in those situations.
Yeah, I agree. Gavin, at least to me, it's the latter, not the former. Because if it's the former, I think we even had one of the applicants for the EAC tonight works for somebody who has done business for the town. And so, we don't want to catch that just because, I think we want there to be an actual conflict. That's my read.
Doesn't 7 cover that? But they just have to disclose it.
Right. That's where I'm saying I think 9A is, goes well beyond 7, and 9A goes to kind of the first half of what Gavin just said. I think 9A could be read to be that broad to go to the first half of what Gavin said. At least in my reading, and anyone can correct me or, say if they disagree, I think if we just strike 9A, I think the idea of 9A is subsumed in all the other, in paragraphs 1, 7, and 9B and C.
I agree that I don't think we're losing much if we limit it, if we just get rid of 9A. I think it's hard to understand, or I don't even know how you'd apply it just because of the way it's written. but can we do that? Anybody object to removing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not
9K?
married, again, this is more of a council. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt Ms. Bonholz, but again, I know that there's some communities who have gone and made a policy that's more restrictive than the State Ethics Act. So I'm not, if we want to look into whether that's, the route you want to go, we can certainly explore that a little bit. I just want to make, my goal is I just want it to be clear. I'm just looking for clarity so that someone reads it and they know exactly what's prohibited and what's not, as an appointee or an employee or whatever, that they're allowed to do this, but they're not allowed to do that. And that's really all I'm trying to accomplish here.
What I
Yeah.
don't want to happen is I don't want people getting on committees to advance themselves or to advance their companies. So I don't want that to happen. That's what I don't want to happen. So if this prevents that, for example, I work for AHN. AHN is building a hospital there. I recused myself, right, from any decision with AHN. But the truth of the matter is, I got nothing to do with them building that. What I do is totally unrelated to that. I am not even remotely related to that. But I still recused myself. But it's different, that recusal, and I work there, than someone who owns a company and they say, oh, I'm going to recuse myself while all of you talk about doing business with my company. Do you see what I mean? That's really different to me, because you're friends with that person and you favor them. You have a bias to them, whether you mean it, if you like them, whether you mean to or not. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. And there was another town that had a council person that was doing all the, her business was doing all the print work for the town, had been for years and years and years. Oh, just recused himself when it came time to decide on that. But that's how it was done. Oh, well, yeah, we'll give it to her. That's what I want. That's why they did their ethics policy, was to stop that.
Okay.
So that's what I want to avoid.
So you're saying if somebody's currently doing business with the town or has a history of doing business with the town, you don't want to put them in a position where they would have to, we would count on them to recuse themselves from a situation.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. That's what I'm trying to figure
I
out.
just think there's sometimes, like, you can't predict necessarily. You couldn't have predicted, for instance, when you became a councilwoman, that AHN would want to build a hospital in McCandless.
Right.
I don't think that should exclude you from being a councilwoman.
But I don't own AHN, and whatever they build is not going to affect me. And there's actually nothing I could do to even have influence that.
Right, and I appreciate that you abstained and you recused yourself from the conversation. I think that was appropriate to preserve the optics of the situation, if nothing else.
Right.
And you can't count on everybody to act that same way.
If Trish owned property, I'll just use Trish because she's in real estate. Trish owned property, and she said, oh, the town wants to build a park and they want to buy my property. I'm just going to recuse myself from the discussion. Do you see what I mean?
I think, to me, that goes to the, instead of, and Trish, sorry that you're continuing on in this example, but instead of going to the ethics of Trish, that would actually go to the ethics of the rest of the committee, or committee, council, whatever the body was. So, that's more something to, you won't make decisions for the town, for the committee, for whatever body you're serving based on your personal affiliations and personal preferences of individuals. So in other words, instead of that being something that we're trying to word to ethically target Trish in that hypothetical, we should actually be wording the language to ethically target the rest of the body. Did that make any sense to anyone
I don't-
else, or
I
did that
don't-
only make sense in my own head?
That makes sense.
That's like Trisha wearing a mask. That's like all of us wearing a mask because Trisha's infectious to me. That's backwards, right? The person that needs the mask is Trisha, right? Not everybody else, so we don't catch it from her. That's just, like I said, I don't know how to fix this. That's a worry of mine. I don't even know if that's what that's supposed to say. That's the only concern. I've seen it happen. It's happened in this town. It's happened since I've been on council. Okay, that's what I want to prevent.
The example that Bob had sent around before about, I think it was Louisville's Code of Ethics. One of the requirements was that if you, in the situation where you would recuse yourself from the discussion, you had to physically leave the room for the discussion. I thought that was a nice, like a kind of a stronger take, because in the situation that you're describing, Kim, maybe it wouldn't, the people remaining in the room would be able to speak honestly about the business in that situation without you being physically present.
That's just my concern. If it's addressed in here already, then I'm fine with letting it go how it is. Take out A, that's fine. If it's, if it's not, then that's the concern I have. Only because I've seen it happen.
Yeah, I mean, there is a protection out there for larger contracts, I would say, because you have a bidding process, but you're right. I mean, there could be certain situations where for professional services or otherwise, that, that could occur. And it does go beyond what the state would require. I'm just not sure the best way to accomplish what your goal is, but I think I understand what you're saying.
So what if we deleted letter 9 or 9A and added the language that Gavin had mentioned under number 7, outlining the Ethics Act's description of a conflict of interest?
That's fine. That's fine with me.
Could we also provide a copy of the Ethics Act?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Is everybody happy?
I'm good.
So I'm sorry, I know we're almost finished here. Just 9A, or are we gonna keep 9B and 9C? Or are we just gonna get rid of 9 in total? Bob, I'm sorry, I should have.
Were you okay with B and C? I didn't hear you complain about B and C.
No, I just wonder if it will be encompassed by a conflict of interest. Tell you what, let me look at the specific definition of conflict whenever I add this up, and if it makes sense, we'll turn B and C into A and B, and we'll just get rid of A. And if it looks like it's very duplicative, then we'll axe the whole thing. But I'll err on the side of leaving B and C in unless it really doesn't make any sense.
I like that.
I think that's fair. We don't have to say the same thing more than once, I think. Okay. All right. Send that around to us, Gavin. So hopefully we can have some ideas. So maybe we can move forward on this.
Okay.
Too. Okay. Is there any more new business? Anyone have anything new?
Did we intend to discuss the, pardon me, the Citizen Award of Recognition tonight?
No, I don't think so. Is that on the agenda somewhere?
It was not on the agenda. I'm asking as a new business item. We received a couple of suggestions.
We just pushed that forward because this agenda was so grueling.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. I'm good for tonight.
Can we move on to 10? So what we're going to change 10 a little bit. I need a motion, but what we're going to change 10. Okay. These are my thoughts about number 10 is when we interviewed our first 2 people for the EAC, those of you who are not brand spanking new, everyone's new on council, but those of you who are not brand spanking new, we interviewed 2 people for the EAC a month ago. Is that right? Give me a nod, Bob. A month ago? Thank you.
A little more
month ago.
than.
Okay, so what I would have said to the new council members is go back and review that recording so you know those 2 people, right? Because we have like 8 applicants for 5 positions, okay? Except we were just a new person with recording. Anyway, it was lost. We did not record it.
Oh,
I'm sorry. It's true.
my fault.
I wasn't going to blame you.
I'll gladly take the blame. I mean, I thought I hit record button. It didn't record.
So, okay. So anyway, that happened. So to me, the only way that I can think of to be fair, because how can the new council members, they've never even seen these other people, let alone their interview. What I was thinking about doing, because there's 2 of them and then 2 new ones, is doing all 4, asking those 2 people if they would come back and interview again and see if they will. Explain to them what happened, apologize, we're sorry. And then interview just those 4 people next week and then put off the library to the fall, not next week, next meeting, and put off the library to the one after that. I can't think of another way to do this, to be fair.
I think we have to offer that.
I think we do, yeah. Thoughts on everyone, because we want to be fair. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm good with that. I'm good with doing that. If they are hesitant to come back or don't want to do it for whatever reason, I mean, I guess the other option could be the 2 newest folks abstain, and you vote on those 2 first and we abstain. If for whatever reason it just didn't work, like not even if they didn't want to come back, if for whatever they couldn't come back because of scheduling or, you know, something like that, I guess that could be an alternative.
Well, the way this would work is it's a nomination process, so it's not like we go through each person. So what it would be doing is meaning that you and Mike would just, you'd have 2 less people that you could potentially nominate for that position. So I'm not sure that would work out.
Yeah.
If we give an up and down vote on each person, then maybe, because we'd be odd still without the 2 of you. But it doesn't quite work like that, so I don't think that would work out.
Okay.
If they couldn't make it, and they said, well, we can't make it, but we'd be okay doing a written statement, we could offer them that if they were willing to do that. Or we just may have to try the following week, I guess. I mean, we have to be fair. You know, we have to be as fair as we can be. And this is just the only thing I could come up with.
Gavin looks like he wants to say something.
No.
Really?
I'm just listening.
Lawyers always have that look. They always look like they want to say something.
Yeah. Is that what that look means?
Among others.
Gavin, do you think this is a fair thing?
It is. I mean, it's certainly also fair to allow, you know, all the council people to just review the resumes and the applications. And I mean, they're not certainly prevented from voting on nominating someone or voting on someone just because they missed the interview. I think your point is, did all these folks get to put their best foot forward by actually appearing and, you know, answering questions? It doesn't really give those folks the same sort of full picture. But again, it doesn't certainly doesn't legally prevent them from voting for someone just because they weren't there for the interview.
So are you saying that if they can't make it next week, then we still vote anyway?
No, that's totally a council decision. It's not, my only point is legally, just because the new council people weren't there for the interviews doesn't mean that they can't review the written materials that were submitted, the resume, et cetera, and still, vote for people even though they missed the interview.
Bob, let's see if we can get them.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
just see if we can get them.
We made a note to try.
If we can get them, then that would be just the easiest thing. And I think that, would be less likely to cause, anyone to be disgruntled.
Right.
So if everybody's okay with that, the motion would be to do the reconvene meeting, to fill the positions of the EAC, leave off the library. Anybody want to make that motion?
Madam President, I move to reconvene this meeting at 6:30 PM on August 24th, 2020 to conduct interviews to fill positions on the Environmental Advisory Committee.
Well done. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Oh, all right. I got 3 seconds. Somebody say your name who wants to be second.
I got David written down.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Any comments about that? Okay. All right. No comments, no questions. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All
Aye.
right. All right. The motion will be reconvened on August 24th. Thank you all for hanging in there. This was a long one.
We're all set for my lengthy executive session to discuss a number of matters with council.
No, we didn't announce that. Yeah, so no.
Well, that's
we're not
fine
doing
because I get to log off if that happens.
it. No, we're all, Gavin.
I know you want to hang out, Gavin, but my gosh, it's been hours.
Yeah, Gavin, go ahead and have executive session. We'll get back with you on the 24th.
All right, everybody. Everybody have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Gav.
Night.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.